Shades, Chapter 14. Michael stared at the specter that hung in the air behind Jim Valenti. The ghost stood almost 10 feet tall, looking even taller because the creature had a bend and stooped to fit under the basement ceiling. Loose cloth clung to the specter, folds that barely covered the emaciated figure and flapped in the wind. Dark circles surrounded the black eyes, and the creature was bald. Staring at the creature, Michael felt certain the thing had stepped out of some horror movie, not a grave. The static-charged air whipped through the garage, and sparks leapt across some of the boxes of ore samples. "Michael," Valenti yelled across the roaring winds, "get the girl out of here!" He tried to step forward, but the wind sucked him back into the basement room. The door slammed shut with a sudden fierceness that swallowed the beam from the flashlight Valenti carried. Suddenly aware that Kelly was screaming, fighting, and clinging to him all at the same time, Michael guided her out of the garage. Garage door slipped free of the jammed position it had been in and dropped back down with a heavy clink behind them. Spotting Valenti's truck parked in front of the house, Michael sprinted for the vehicle, half carrying Kelly as she struggled to keep up. When he reached the truck, he shoved the girl inside. "You'll be safe here," Michael said. "Where are you going?" Kelly demanded. "To help Valenti. You can't leave me here." Michael closed the door and said, "Keep your head down," and ran back to Wilkins' garage. He narrowed his eyes against the spitting grit and dust that rose from the garage floor. The wind slashed him with icy talons. Summoning the energy that was part of his alien heritage, Michael threw out a hand. The energy struck the garage door and forced it back up into the tracks. However, the garage door only traveled something less than 3 feet. Michael threw himself under the garage door's edge, sliding and rolling like a base runner stealing second. He pushed himself up on the other side, summoning more energy and creating a ball of light in his left palm. The light illuminated the garage. Lightning struck the Willis Jeep, causing the vehicle to rock violently for a moment. A black singe marked the place where the lightning struck. The static electricity discharge still raced through Michael, but somehow seemed dimmer. Either whatever was causing the buildup was dying down, or using his powers was negating the effects. He increased the size of the ball of light in his hand, amazed at how the electrical disturbance retreated before him. "Valenti," Michael yelled. "Here," Valenti yelled back. "Door stuck. I can't get it open." "Step back from the door," Michael ordered, then focused his energy on the door. When the force he generated smashed into the door, the basement door blew open. Valenti lay inside, covering his head with one arm and holding the flashlight he'd taken from Kelly. He glanced up at Michael. Without hesitation, but with an acquired knowledge of what one of the creatures was capable of, Michael crossed the room, watching as the elongated and emaciated form of the poorly robed man turned toward him. "Do you see it?" Valenti asked. "Yeah," Michael replied, watching the creature floating through the air. The wraps that covered the ghost flapped in the wind. The dead face remained emotionless, the mouth and eyes all open in perfect black circles. "Don't you?" "No," Valenti answered. Even as Michael wondered about that and wondered what he was going to do, the thing changed shape, morphing into a young woman with a broken face. Valenti cursed and backed away from the creature. "Do you see it now?" Michael asked. "Yeah," Valenti answered hoarsely. "That's the first woman I ever saw murdered after I became a deputy." Feeling braver and more certain of himself, Michael shook his head. Sand and grit still whirled in the room, stinging his eyes and scratching at his face and arms. He had to speak loudly to be heard over the wind. "That's not a ghost. That's something else. It's something that can change forms. That isn't what it was a moment ago. I never heard of a ghost that could do that." "Jim Valenti," the ghostly woman said. She stood straight and still, despite the wind cycling within the darkened basement. "You could have saved me. You could have prevented my death. I died because you didn't take me out of that house and away from my husband." Valenti stared at the ghost. Panic darted through his eyes, but he stood his ground. "It's not real," Michael said, sensing that the ghost was somehow touching Valenti's fear, making it stronger. "It's not a ghost, it's something else." "It looks pretty real to me," Valenti said. His eyes never left the ghost walking toward him. "I tried to save her. I got her to leave her husband once, but she went back, and when she did, he killed her." The ghost continued walking toward Valenti. It flickered like an image on an old black and white movie. A hand lifted, pointing. Then a huge spark of electricity flashed from the fingertips. The electricity caught Valenti in the chest and knocked him back against the wall. A cry of pain tore from his lips. A silver shine tracked across the basement floor, drawing Michael's eyes. He missed whatever caused the shine and thought maybe it was an ore sample that might have been in the basement, but he noticed the crowbar that Valenti had dropped. You killed me, the ghost thing told Valenti, closing in on him. Electricity sparked at her fingertips as she moved toward him relentlessly. A desperate idea formed in Michael's head as he stared at the crowbar. He picked the curved piece of metal up from the basement floor and turned to the ghost. Grabbing the crowbar like a baseball bat, he swung at the ghost's back. The crowbar cast through the ghost's body. Okay, Michael thought, the Neanderthal approach is definitely out. He fell to his knees and stabbed the straightest end of the crowbar into the basement's stone floor. You are responsible for my death, Jim Valenti, the ghost said, reaching for him. And you harbor the outsiders. They don't belong here. They've already brought death to this community. More will follow. They are not like your people. The outsiders will never care about your people. Valenti stood his ground and tried to shove against the ghost. His hands passed for the thing, then a massive surge of electricity dropped him to the floor. On his knees, both fists around the crowbar, Michael poured his energy into the metal length. Crowbar started glowing red. He pictured the energy pulling at the ghost and willed the power to suck the thing into the ground, whatever it was. Abruptly, the ghost jerked back from Valenti, feet skidding against the stone floor. No! The ghost howled as it continued sliding toward the crowbar. The creature whirled around. Michael kept pouring his energy into the crowbar. The ghost levered an accusing arm toward him. You will die, outsider! You will die! You can't remain here! Michael didn't bother to reply. The ghost was scared of him. That had to be a good thing. The ghost came closer, sparks playing between its fingers. The eyes changed, becoming dark, bottomless pits. You're going to die, outsider. This is not your place. You can't stay here. Michael poured more power into the crowbar, trying to draw the creature into the bar and ground it. Whatever else the creature might be consisted of electrical fields. A huge static energy charge exploded in front of Michael's face, blinding him for an instant and covering his face in a sudden wash of heat. Then he watched as the ghost stretched and became disproportional, like a strip of taffy being pulled. In the next instant, the ghost was sucked into the crowbar, yanked along the lines of electromagnetic force Michael had channeled the creature into. The ghost disappeared and the wind disturbance died away. An eerie silence descended over the basement area. Valenti pushed himself to his feet cautiously. Is it gone? Michael held the crowbar fast in both hands. The power he contained still throbbed within the length of metal. I don't know. I've got it contained for now. What is it? Michael shook his head, trying to keep concentrating on holding the force within the crowbar. He imagined the energy striking the stone floor and burning itself out of existence. A silver surface glinted to Michael's right, drawing his attention to a pile of rags and bones lying against the wall to the right. The thing, whatever it was, moved arthritically, rocking back and forth. It was about the size of a quarter, barely seen in the beam of the flashlight Valenti held. An explosion of light filled the basement again. Through slitted lids, Michael saw lightning shoot from the crowbar and strike the bobbing silver object trundling through the pile of rags and bones. The crowbar was suddenly dead weight in his hands. Sparks smoldered in the pile of old clothing like coals in a campfire. Valenti joined Michael, walking a little unsteadily. He aimed the beam at the pile of clothes. You saw it, didn't you? Valenti asked. Yeah, Michael croaked. The pile of rags turned out to be the remnants of clothing that had rotted away. Inside the rags was a skeleton. The eye patch had fallen as the flesh had melted away over the years, but still hung around the dead man's neck. A leather pouch on a rawhide thong around his neck had a hole torn through the side. The whole left side of the skull was crushed. Bone fragments barely clung to the damaged area and the empty cavity where the brain had been. Terrell Swanson? Michael asked, struggling a little to keep from backing away from the skeleton. Standing up to a ghost that he didn't believe was a ghost was one thing, but this was definitely a dead guy. Probably take the forensics people a little while to agree to that, Valenti said in a tired voice, but I'm betting they do. Wilkins killed him, Michael said. That would be my guess, too. When that old man gets out of the hospital, he's going to be up on murder charges. Valenti shifted the light to the gaping hole in the back wall of the basement. The edges of the hole were jagged concrete. A pick and a sledgehammer lay on the floor nearby. Wilkins killed Swanson and buried him in here, Michael said. Then he dug him up. Why? We don't know Wilkins dug up the body, Valenti pointed out. That's just guesswork. Want to bet against me? No. Valenti probed the cavity in the wall with the flashlight. Spiderwebs filled the space, but they were old and covered with dust. Spiders lived in here for a while. He played the beam over the dead spider bodies, cluttering the floor space at the bottom of the cavity. Something killed them? Michael asked. Maybe the ghost thing that was trapped in here with the dead guy? Valenti, no. No, this wasn't sudden, like through an electrical surge. They starved to death. Michael stared at the hundreds of bodies inside the makeshift crypt. Why would Wilkins wall up so many spiders with the corpse? There probably weren't many spiders at first, Valenti said. The few that got locked up inside the wall had babies. He shone the light on the desiccated corpse at their feet. They had food at first. Okay, Michael said, edging toward a gross-out meltdown. That's plenty of bug food chain stuff for me. If somebody like you were teaching biology at the high school, more people would stay awake and lunch wouldn't be such a big draw. A piece of silver glinted on the dead man's clothes. The material still sustained glowing embers from the lightning strike. Valenti knelt and took a folding pocket knife from his jeans. Carefully, he speared a delicate network of wires that looked like a bit of shredded aluminum foil. Black stains showed on it, offering new testimony to the fact that the lightning had hit it. Michael looked at the metal piece. What's that? That, Valenti said, is what I'd call a clue. Then he directed the flashlight beam over stacks of plates containing half-eaten food, beer bottles with cigarette butts floating in them, and a thick book. So are those. Michael took in all the dishes and abandoned food, the beer bottles holding cigarette butts. Somebody put in a lot of time down here. Valenti studied the food. None of the food looks more than 4 or 5 days old. So what? Michael asked. Wilkins sat down here spending time with his old murdered buddy? Valenti reached in among the plates and took out the book. He showed the thick tome to Michael. The Bible? Michael asked. Valenti opened the book at the marked sections. Yeah, and judging from the areas Wilkins is reading, he was studying how to perform an exorcism. Staring at the pile of bones lying in the basement floor and remembering the ghost he saw at the crash down, Michael said, yeah, well, I guess he didn't learn enough. It's okay, someone shouted in Kyle's ear. We've got him. Back off. Feeling the throbbing pain in his injured arm, Kyle remembered how the room on the remodeled job crackled with static electricity before the dead man showed up. He gratefully moved back from the old man lying in the bed. He's coming for me, the old man yelled, fighting against the team of nurses and 2 doctors that piled on him in an effort to keep him in the bed. He's dead, do you hear me? He's standing there with half his head missing. God, it was an accident. It was an accident. Kyle walked backward, bumping into Quinlan, who took charge of his injured arm and applied one of the antiseptic compresses the nurse had given him to slow the bleeding. What's going on? Quinlan asked. Kyle watched the old man struggling against the doctors and nurses. The old guy had surprising strength. He thinks he sees a ghost, Kyle said. Where? Quinlan asked. In here, Kyle whispered, gazing around the darkened room, looking for the dead man he'd seen earlier. Somewhere in here with us. The explosive lightning bolt had taken out the primary power inside the emergency room, but the battery-operated auxiliary lights came on. Some of the darkness went away. There was no sign of the ghost. Trank him, one of the doctors told the other. Get him sedated before we have a riot on our hands. The doctor rushed past Kyle, heading for the medicinal supplies. The old man continued to yell fearfully and fight against the hospital staff in an effort to get out of the bed. A moment later, the doctor returned with a hypodermic and injected the sedative into the IV shunt in the back of the patient's hand. Another moment of hoarse yelling ensued, then the old man went limp. Quinlan guided Kyle back to the bed. You moved really fast when that old guy started screaming, the construction foreman said. Yeah, Kyle said, taking a seat on the bed. He scanned the emergency room, noticing Liz and Max for the first time. Figures. Any weirdness that goes around here? They gotta be somewhere close by. He wondered where Isabel and Michael were. Kyle glanced his throbbing arm across his chest, supporting his wrist with his other hand. He glanced at the old man, seeing him sleeping now. A nurse hovered nearby, checking the machines hooked up to the patient. Liz and Max approached Kyle. What are you doing here? Liz asked, staring at Kyle's arm. Accident, Kyle said. They tell me it looks worse than it is. Are you okay? I will be. What are you doing here? Checking on another patient, Liz said. Did you hear about what happened at the crash down? Kyle nodded. The guy who had the heart attack and the crash down is here? Somewhere, Liz acknowledged. Have you talked to your dad? Not since last night, Kyle said. I was up and gone this morning before he made it out of bed. That was happening more and more lately, and the whole pattern was really beginning to get aggravating. He went somewhere with Michael, Max said. We were wondering where. Kyle shook his head. Couldn't tell you. Quinlan glanced at his watch, then said, I got a couple phone calls to make, kid. You'll be in good hands with your friends till I get back? Sure, Kyle said. Why don't you go ahead back to work? I'm going to be fine. Quinlan shook his head. I'm old-fashioned. I always go home with the ones I brought to the dance. I brought you in here. I'll see you out and home. Kyle waited till Quinlan was out of earshot. He lowered his voice. So what's going on? Liz shook her head. We don't know, Max said. Whatever it is, it's going on out at the Mesalico reservation, even worse than here. Kyle couldn't believe that. The ghosts are real. I saw one. Did you see one? Did you see this one? Max asked. No, Kyle said, but I have seen them. They're really out there. I know, Max said. I've seen them. More than one? Yeah. Kyle thought about it. Did you see this one? Max nodded. How? Kyle asked. I didn't see it. I don't know, but they want us out of Roswell. What makes you think that? Kyle asked. They told me, and they told Isabel as well. The statement delivered so matter-of-factly by Max chilled Kyle. If something was there in Roswell and was after the alien trio again, then the chance existed that he and his dad would get sucked up into the situation again. The lights came back on inside the emergency room. So what are you guys doing about it? Kyle asked. Max shrugged. We don't know what to do. We're getting together later at Michael's to sort things out. What about my dad? Max shrugged. All we know is that Maria said he was with Michael. Michael knows about the meeting at his house. Maybe your dad will be there. Neither one of them is particularly notorious for checking in. Feeling the pain burn along his injured arm, Kyle leaned back against the bed and elevated the limb. Max looked around, then back at Kyle. If we weren't here, I could fix your arm. I'm going to have to get stitches, Kyle admitted. I'm not happy. Believe me when I say that if you could heal me without me having to answer a bunch of questions, I'd be all for it. I don't mean to cut this short, Liz said, but I've got to get back to the crash down. Max looked uncomfortably at Kyle. I'm her ride. After I drop her off, I can come back. Kyle shook his head and waved the offer away. It's cool. My boss is going to stick around and get me home. After a brief hesitation, Max said, if your dad knew you were here, he'd be here. I know, Kyle said, but the answer was automatic, not even close to the confusion that he truly felt. His relationship with his dad had always been hard because his dad had held such high expectations for him. Now with his professional life and chaos around him, his dad didn't seem able to fight back or to demand the same high standards he'd exacted. After Liz and Max said their goodbyes, Kyle blew his breath out and tried to block the pain from his arm. He closed his eyes, blowing his breath out again, and then breathing in through his nose the way his football coach had taught him to control pain and regain his focus. The exercise had worked in the past, but the results at the moment weren't worth mentioning. Suddenly, the firm surface of the hospital bed seemed far away, like the bed was supporting someone else's body. Disorientation made his head swim, almost triggering a bout of nausea. You know the outsiders, a clear, cold voice accused. They are your friends, Kyle Valenti. Don't you know that you should fear that which is different? That would be the whole high school, Kyle thought. Don't trust the outsiders, the voice went on. They are not like you. They don't have the same agenda that your people do. You can't trust anyone outside your own species. Kyle struggled awake, but couldn't. Then pain flamed along his injured arm. He groaned and found he was suddenly able to move again. Blinking his eyes open, he spotted a silver thing on the wall behind the bed. He had a brief impression of wire-thin tentacles and an oblong body the size of a quarter. Soundlessly, the insect thing spread diaphanous wings that resembled see-through aluminum foil. The thing hurled itself into the air and sped away, glinting occasionally under the lights of the emergency room. Pain flared in Kyle's arm again, drawing his attention down in time to watch Dr. Bohr shove a hypodermic into his forearm again. The impersonal pressure of the anesthetic filled his arm, turning the limb numb. At the same time, his mind seemed to clear as if a cloud had lifted. This is going to sting a bit, Dr. Bohr said. Sorry, I thought you were asleep. Not asleep now. Kyle looked up at the wall over his bed. The silver thing with wire-thin limbs seemed to have disappeared. Hallucination, he told himself. That's all it is. But he was scared that it hadn't. You are on chapter 15.
Winded and tired, mind racing with the knowledge of all the things that were taking place back in the Mesalico town, River Dog halted his journey up the side of the tall hill. From where he stood, he could see the lights of the houses back in his village. Darkness had fallen only moments ago, scattering shadows across the desert that would only turn gray when the moon burned in full. The wind had started to change as he neared his destination, blowing out the last of the diurnal heat and bringing in the first of the nocturnal chill that filled the desert at night. River Dog pulled the ceremonial robe he wore more tightly about his body. The lights in the town were dim, only a mere handful compared with what was usually there. Many of the Mesalico people had left, gone to stay with relatives and friends in other cities and reservations. After Max Evans had left, the power of the spirits had seemed to dwindle. No longer could the spirits make physical contact with the Mesalico, but they appeared and disappeared with unnerving timing. They also shouted and raved, talking against the visitors, ordering the Mesalico to drive the visitors from their midst and from Roswell. Resolutely, Riverdog turned and continued his journey back up the hill. His eyes followed the whip-crack trail, barely noticeable against the rugged rocks and scrubby cacti. The knoll and the cave it hid were less than 50 yards away. Riverdog leaned into the climb, putting more weight on the walking stick he used. The backs of his legs burned with the fatigue, but he never hesitated in his assault upon the hill. He had told Max Evans the truth when he'd said he hadn't known the location of the place where the sun god had punished his ancestors in Raven. Rather than stay within the village for the spirits of his ancestors to haunt, he'd chosen to journey to one of his places of power. The cave was one of those. In the middle of his next, a spirit materialized beside him, matching the step with ease, as if it had been there all along. The spirit was a wizened old man. "Riverdog," the spirit said, and his voice sounded frail and weak. "I do not know you," Riverdog said. He never broke his stride, putting one foot in front of the other as he continued the climb to the cave. "I am called Hunts with Owls," the ancient one said. "I was once medicine man to our people." Riverdog looked at the spirit's leathery face, taking in the intricate woven beads of his leathers and the tiny bone carvings of owls that held back his hair braids. The eyes gaped like black holes in the shadows, but Riverdog felt the heat of the spirit's gaze. "I have heard of you," Riverdog acknowledged. "You were very powerful in our tribe. You helped many people with sickness brought by the Europeans." "I also fought and warred against those who took our lands," the spirit said. Riverdog planted his walking stick and continued up the steep hillside. "What do you want with me, Hunts with Owls? What do you seek here?" the spirit asked. "A better understanding of what is happening to my people." "We have tried to explain what is happening to your people." The one word, your, instead of our, grated on Riverdog's mind. How could the spirits feel that way? He turned his attention to the thing at his side. With the moonlight coming out now, the spirit turned pale gray and translucent. "You are not of my people," Riverdog stated. "You set yourself apart from us." "Your ways have changed," the spirit snarled. "You know they have changed, Riverdog. You have fought those changes. These people now, they are not what my people were. Not what our people were." Riverdog turned from the ghost and fixed his attention on the cave at the top of the knoll. "I will hear no more. I do not know what manner of creature you are, but you are not Hunts with Owls." "Fool," the thing snapped. In the next breath, the spirit was gone. Riverdog continued the walk up the hill. When he reached the cave, he went inside. The familiar dry and musty scent of the cave made him feel at home. The cave was small, scarcely having enough room for Riverdog to sit cross-legged under the low ceiling. He spread out his robes and sat, then began chanting, willing himself into a state that would be more receptive to the things that were going on in the world around him. The spirits were not ancestors who had returned. All the violence he had seen until now had led him to think that way, and the fact that the spirits only became physical when Max Evans was around let Riverdog know they were not what they claimed to be. Riverdog continued chanting, feeling himself slip into that halfway state that took him away from himself. Some days, when he cast his spirit out, as he was doing now, he flew above the desert with Hawk and could feel the wind beneath his wings. At other times, he patted on tough leather paws with Coyote through the desert night. Not all of the young men he trained could still do such a thing. It was a way of life, a way of becoming one with nature that was disappearing. Suddenly, Riverdog felt that he was no longer alone inside the cave. He opened his eyes, surprised at the mist that coiled at the mouth of the cave. 4 figures strode into the cave. They were man-like in shape, but much too tall and disproportionate. They wore silver and red skin-tight uniforms and red boots. Pale blue skin made their opalescent green eyes stand out in triangular faces ridged with heavy bone over the eyes and along the jaw. Their noses were almost flat, mobile antennae segmented like earthworms, but chitinous as horn growth twisted atop their heads. Riverdog tried to stand, but found his body unresponsive. He was trapped in his own flesh, unable even to cry out. as the four figures closed in on him. "You were warned," one of the figures said. "You should have listened." Helpless, Riverdog watched as the lead figure reached for him, covering his eyes with a four-fingered hand. Riverdog felt the hard chitin of the figure's hand close over his eyes. Then his mind seemed to implode, flooding his senses with black pain that took him far away. Max sat on the floor in front of the television in Michael's house. He watched the news programs and special reports in disbelief, flipping through the channels by using his powers. Story after story showed witnesses testifying about close encounters of the ghostly kind that had taken place during the day and were still going on in the evening. "It's everywhere," Liz commented quietly. She stood in the cramped kitchen by the table, a piece of pizza forgotten in one hand. They'd pooled their money together, even raiding some of the stash Michael had put back from the job out in the desert, and bought a modest dinner. "It's not everywhere," Isabel replied calmly. She sat on Michael's couch and watched the television. "Only a few dozen people have claimed to have seen ghosts." "Only a few dozen?" Max repeated the words in his mind. "Only a few dozen, but those numbers are growing." Less than 3 hours ago, they'd all rendezvoused at Michael's house, including Valenti and Kyle, fresh from the hospital with his arm tightly bandaged. "However many ghosts there actually are," Michael put in, "those things are after us. Let's keep that in perspective, too." "The question is," Valenti said, "why are they after you?" Nobody had an answer. Finally, Maria said, "Look, I didn't want to be the one to point out the obvious, but we have to consider that maybe these ghosts are things that Tess might have sent after you guys." "Why would she do that?" Michael asked. "Because she didn't quite get her way when she left," Maria said. "She got to escape," Michael said. "She got Max to father her child, a child she might be able to get elected the new king." "Kings aren't elected," Maria said. Michael frowned. "Whatever the point is, maybe Mama Queen is going to have a lot of power, too." The pang of loss vibrated through Max again. He could still feel the weight of his son in his arms, and he guessed that the feeling was probably a lot like the phantom pangs of an amputation victim. "Tess didn't get everything she wanted," Maria said. "She wanted all of you to go back with her. That's why she killed Alex, remember? Because he found out she was here to set you guys up and turn you over to the enemies you had in your past lives." "This isn't Tess," Valenti said in a quiet, calm voice. "She'd claim credit if she was behind this." Max heard the pain in Valenti's voice. Tess had lived with Valenti and Kyle, becoming a sister and a daughter for a time. "This is something outside everything you guys have been through so far," Valenti went on. "Then how do they know about us?" Michael challenged. "Because maybe they can sense you the same way you can sense them." "We don't sense them," Michael said. "You see them," Valenti pointed out. "Every time there's been a ghost, you've seen them when no one else could." "You've seen the ghost too," Maria said. "Liz and I are the only ones who haven't." "I didn't see the ghost until it wanted me to," Valenti reminded. "When Kelly was with us, she and Michael saw the ghost first. Later, after Michael took her away, the ghost changed shape, became someone I knew." "So how does that work?" Michael asked. "The ghosts only appear to certain people?" "In Roswell," Max said, "that appears to be the case. No one except Wilkins and Michael saw the ghost of Terrell Swanson, even though the crashdown was full of people." "And I was standing there with him," Liz said. "Not to mention my mother. She was speaking with my dead grandmother this morning. I never saw her. I'm sure that was part of this." "Whatever is empowering the ghosts has the ability to be selective," Valenti said. "They appear to whomever they want, as whoever they want." "Or maybe whatever is causing the ghost is limited," Isabel said. "Limited?" Michael snorted and helped himself to another pizza slice. The problem hadn't affected his appetite. "Those things are throwing lightning bolts around like it was nothing." "There are things you can do that no one human can do," Maria pointed out. "How do they know who to appear as?" Valenti asked. "Isabel, you said the woman who nearly ran you down saw her daughter. A daughter who died in childbirth." Isabel nodded. "Where did the ghost get its information?" Valenti asked. "How did it know who to appear as?" "An unborn child wouldn't be so hard," Michael said, "especially when the ghost appeared as a little girl instead of a baby. The mother had never seen the baby as anything other than that." "What about Swanson?" Valenti persisted. Wilkins killed him and buried him in his basement almost 40 years ago, Michael said. The eye patch may have been enough to freak Wilkins out. Valenti turned on him. You looked at Swanson's pictures. You said it was he. Was it? A troubled look crossed Michael's face. Yeah, it was Swanson. So how did the ghost know who to look like? Valenti asked. The ghost could have known about Swanson from old newspapers, Max said. Maybe, Valenti conceded, but in order to know about Wilkins and Swanson, they'd have known where to look and what they were looking for. Everybody in Roswell knows the story about Wilkins and Swanson, Liz said. After I figured out who he was, I remembered the story. Okay, Valenti said, folding his arms across his chest. I'm going to play the devil's advocate here. Why would the ghosts wait so long to make their move? He's right, Isabel said. We've lived here all our lives, accepting the fact the ghosts want us out of here. They've had almost 20 years to do it. They're not just after us, Max said. They want the Mesalico gone, too. Why? Liz asked. River Dog tied the manifestation of the ghosts to the old legend, Max said. That's a bunch of bull, Maxwell, Michael said. We all know that some old Indian legend isn't going to make ghosts suddenly start appearing. Max stared at Michael, and he noticed the rest of them did the same. I don't think we can rule the legend out, Maria said. Michael turned stone-faced and shook his head in disbelief. You're grasping at straws, people. Give us something else, Maria challenged. Michael crossed his hands over his chest. This is stupid. Wait, Isabel said. I think we're onto something here. She nodded to Valenti. Keep going. Valenti held his hat in his hands, tracing the brim with one forefinger as he thought. Boil it all down to what we know. The ghosts appear to certain people and somehow know who to appear as. They read minds, Kyle said. Everyone turned to look at him. Suddenly looking uncomfortable, Kyle shrugged. How else can you explain it? I mean, the ghost I saw was the first dead man I ever saw. I don't know the guy's name. I don't know if I ever knew it, but I remembered him because Dad and I were on our way home from a ball game one night when Dad got a call about a traffic fatality. Dad had to cover the accident until the EMTs arrived. The guy lost control of his motorcycle on 285 and got shredded. Max saw Liz's eyes narrow as the gruesome image popped into her mind. Valenti had a pained look on his face, as if suddenly realizing some of the things he'd exposed Kyle to while growing up. But Max knew there was new guilt mixed into the feeling as well for not being there at the hospital today with Kyle. Ghosts that read minds? Michael snorted. Yes, Max said calmly. That could explain how the ghosts knew who to appear as, and how they were only visible to the people they chose to haunt. We could see them, Michael said. We're not exactly normal, Isabel put in. And some of you, Maria said pointedly, looking at Michael, are less normal than others. Michael scowled. Before Michael could pick up his end of the argument, Max said, some form of telepathy then. Let's start with that, Valenti said. With telepathic ghosts, Michael said derisively. That's where we're starting, Valenti said. That's not where we're going to end up. Max said the Mesalico were experiencing more manifestations, Michael said. Maybe it has to do with their spirituality, Kyle suggested. Maybe the Mesalico are closer to nature than our culture is. They believe in vision quests, and some of what River Dog has shown you guys has bordered on spirituality. Not exactly looking for New Age answers here, Buddha boy, Michael said. That could have something to do with it, Max said, but maybe it's something simpler. Like proximity, Liz said. Max nodded. Like proximity. The legend may have been based on something that actually happened in the past, Isabel said. Legends usually are, Valenti said. But what event? Maria asked. Spirits returning to haunt the Mesalico? If we go that route, we're right back where we started. River Dog said, Raven stole flames from the sun god, Max said, his mind suddenly churning. Raven brought the flames back to the Mesalico, only he couldn't hold them in his beak. He spat the flames out, and they crashed to the earth, creating the desert. Let's keep the proximity thing going, Valenti said. Looking back over Max's story, River Dog said that the ghosts had only haunted the Mesalico people. They hadn't attacked them until today. Until I was there, Max said. Valenti nodded toward the television. All those other people who have seen ghosts, they aren't saying anything about lightning strikes or strange winds. They're just seeing ghosts. The ghosts reacted more strongly to us, Isabel said. Yeah, Valenti said. Know when the last lightning phenomenon occurred? At the hospital, Liz said, while Max was there. Bingo, Valenti said. Maybe, Michael growled. But what does it mean? Don't know, Valenti said. It's another correlation we need to factor in. Telepathic ghosts that react like a minefield to us? Michael asked. That's a good way to put it, Valenti agreed. Why would they do that? Because they recognize you as a greater threat than anyone else they've met, Valenti said. I heard Riverdog's ancestor, or whatever it was, telling him that the visitors had to be made to leave, Max said. I got the same treatment in the hospital, Kyle said. Only it wasn't from a ghost. He quickly related the story of the strange insect creature he'd seen on the wall. At first, I thought I was just freaking because of the injury and all the weirdness going on. Valenti grimaced. Might have helped if you'd mentioned that story earlier, son. Why? Michael demanded. It wasn't enough that we have telepathic ghosts. Now we have to add in the cyborg afterlife of Jiminy Cricket? Why haven't any of you guys seen ghosts? Valenti asked. If the ghosts wanted to chase you out of Roswell, why didn't they start haunting you? We saw ghosts, Isabel said. Not ghosts of people you know, Valenti corrected. You saw other people's ghosts. Maybe that's worse, Maria said. Was it? Valenti responded. How about if you'd seen the ghost of someone you knew, someone you loved and lost? Silence weighed into the room. Max watched Isabel, knowing they were all remembering Alex. Valenti rubbed his face tiredly. Sorry, I should have thought before I spoke. No, Max said, it's all right. There's no explanation why we haven't seen our own ghosts. Because these telepathic ghosts can't read us, Michael said. We're too strong, or we're the wrong wavelength. Something like that. Maybe the same thing that makes the ghosts fear us also protects us. Except our presence makes the ghosts react more violently, Isabel said. Because the ghosts are afraid of us, Max said. Valenti strode into the midst of the room. Let's check that line of inquiry where it is for the moment. We've done enough there to identify what we might be up against. We need to do some more work. What? Max asked. The tie is missing, Valenti said. What tie? Isabel asked. Max said that Riverdog told him the spirit manifestations began a few days ago, Valenti said. Why are the ghosts only now turning up in Roswell? Because the ghosts are migrating, Max said, following the logic. Valenti smiled mirthlessly. I prefer the term contamination. Roswell is starting to show signs of contamination from whatever has summoned, whatever the ghosts really turn out to be. Max nodded. Scary as it was, the idea of looking for a physical culprit in the middle of all the confusion was also reassuring. But, Valenti said, there's someone who got contaminated early. Who? Max asked. Leroy Wilkins, Valenti answered. The guy in the crashdown? Kyle asked. Valenti nodded. He was just the first one anyone knew about in Roswell, Kyle said. No, Liz put in. My mom was talking to my deceased grandmother this morning. And you can't really say Wilkins was contaminated early, Maria said. Wilkins came into the crashdown today, spazzing out. Today's when all the ghosts seem to have showed up. Before he showed up in Roswell, Valenti said, Wilkins took a pickaxe and a sledgehammer and tore down the basement wall, where he'd hidden his partner after murdering him. At his age, that would have taken some time. Wilkins had poured that wall to stay. When Michael and I searched the room, we found beer bottles and plates with unfinished meals. And a Bible, Michael added, evidently growing more interested in Valenti's story. He reached for another pizza slice. Why would Wilkins have a Bible there? Max asked. Do the math on this one, Maxwell, Michael said. A Bible at the hidden grave of the man Wilkins murdered. Wilkins was trying to perform an exorcism, Maria said. Yeah, Michael said. The food that was down there, it'd been down there for days. Wilkins was haunted long before the rest of Roswell started feeling the effects. Where does Wilkins live? Max asked. On the other side of the city, from the Mesalico reservation, Valenti said. The ghost invasion would have had to skip over Roswell to get to him, then double back. There are other people living out there. He nodded toward the television. So far, there aren't any reports of anyone else out there being affected. Why was Wilkins so special? Maria asked. Exactly, Valenti replied. Liz looked troubled. Why didn't the ghost that was haunting Wilkins' basement haunt someone else after you left? Because I grounded it out with the crowbar, Michael reminded her. The lightning blast destroyed it. It's a ghost, Maria said. How can you kill it again? I don't make up the rules, Michael said. I just play the game. This is so not a game, Michael shrugged. Whatever. After the lightning blasted the ghost away, Valenti said, reaching into his pocket, I found this. Light splintered from the small piece of metal he held. What is it? Max asked. I don't know, Valenti answered. Something that didn't belong. That's what most investigations are all about. Finding the things that aren't supposed to be there. Kyle moved forward. Can I see that? Valenti handed the metal piece to his son. Turning the metal over in his palm, Kyle looked puzzled. This metal looks a lot like the insect thing I saw in the hospital. Cyborg Jiminy Cricket, Michael said. Kyle took no offense. Yes, that's the thing the lightning blast destroyed, Michael said. Maybe it was a button, Isabel suggested. Swanson had one metal button, Valenti said. It was on his jeans. I know because I checked. There's no way this could be a coincidence, Maria said. Is there? If you can put together odds like that, Valenti said, we are going to Vegas. Already been, Michael said. Didn't even bother to pick up a t-shirt. The tie to the Mesalico reservation is Wilkins, Liz said. The Mesalico chased him off tribal lands a few times. Right, Valenti said. I had to escort Wilkins off private property a few times myself. He shook his head. But I keep thinking about how Wilkins must have been these past few days. With all the food and beer in that basement room, Wilkins sat there for a long time trying to get the nerve up to break into that basement wall. Why? Because he was haunted, Liz said. Yeah, but the ghost didn't follow Wilkins into Roswell, Valenti said. That thing, whatever it was, it waited for Michael and me today. Liz rubbed her upper arms as if suddenly chilled. That's totally creepy. Valenti nodded in agreement. I know, Cyborg Jiminy Cricket made me laugh too. Valenti nodded in agreement. So the ghost didn't follow Wilkins into town? Something did, Michael said. I saw Swanson. Another ghost picked Wilkins up when he entered town, Valenti said. That can be the only answer. You think these things communicate? Kyle asked. They have to, Max said. They carry the same message, and they operate in the same fashion. He paused, realizing where Valenti was headed. What we need to know is how Wilkins came to get his own ghost ahead of the people of Roswell. Exactly, Valenti said. The bit of metal you recovered could be some kind of transceiver, Isabel suggested. I figured that too, Valenti said, but it crawled, moved under its own steam, out of Swanson's clothes, and he's been dead more than 30 years. You think whatever that was, Max said, was locked up behind the stone wall. Valenti nodded. That's exactly what I think. He reached into his pocket and took out a leather pouch. Shoving a finger inside the pouch, he showed the ripped side. I found this around the neck of Swanson's corpse. What was inside it? Maria asked. I don't know, Valenti said. A small keepsake, maybe. Whatever it was, it escaped. What do you mean it escaped? Max asked. Valenti wiggled his finger, showing the ragged edges of the hole. Whatever was in here, he said, cut its way out. Interesting.
Chapter 16. This is not a good idea. Isabel studied Max's face as he spoke to her. Apprehension showed in his eyes and the set of his mouth. He's always been too serious, she decided. Taking Max's hand, Isabel said, You know I had to do this. There is no other way. It's too dangerous. Max looked over his shoulder, obviously knowing someone else would back his argument. We know that Wilkins is a murderer. You don't know what he'll do when he sees her in his dreams. Valenti met Max's gaze, then looked at Isabel. If you can do it, Valenti said, it will help to know. Isabel nodded. I can do this. Isabel, Max said, you would never dream off anyone like this. Wilkins is still in the hospital ICU, still on the critical list. It'll be all right. Max fell silent, and with that silence came the full bore of his reproach at her chosen course of action. We need to know what Wilkins knows, Isabel said. There's another way, Max insisted. We'll find another way. No, Isabel said, with the finality she knew her brother would recognize. Max, I'm going to do this, because I can, because it's the only way I can see for us to learn enough to figure out what we're supposed to do, if anything. There still remained the chance that they'd be just as helpless as anyone else. Come back, Max said. Just make sure you come back. I will, Isabel promised. Sliding back on Michael's couch, she laid her head back and closed her eyes. In seconds, she was asleep, and in her dreams, she reached for Leroy Wilkins, prospector and murderer. When Isabel opened her eyes again, she found herself in a small, dark room with stone walls. A dank, earthy smell filled her nose and almost made her sneeze. The soft glow of a battery-powered camp lantern barely fought back the shadows that cloistered the room. What are you doing here? Turning toward the man's angry voice, Isabel saw Leroy Wilkins standing against the wall near the basement door. He was tense and frightened, his eyes sunken so deeply into his head that they were dark pools. It's okay, Isabel said in a soft voice. Wilkins looked around the small room. I ain't here. I got no business being here. Do you know where you are? Isabel asked. Madness lingered in Wilkins' gaze. This is the basement of my house. Isabel waited, noting that the old prospector's eyes settled on the wall opposite him. The wall was complete now, not the broken mass of rock Valenti and Michael described. Terrell Swanson's corpse still remained on the other side. I ain't in the basement of my house, Wilkins said. I'm in the hospital. They took me to the hospital. Told me I was having a heart attack. I remember that. You are in the hospital, Isabel said. This is just a dream. Wilkins' eyes narrowed in suspicion. I don't know you, girl. You don't dream about people you don't know, and I don't know you. They're giving you medication in the hospital, Isabel said. Medication causes hallucinations and dreams. Wilkins shook his head. You ain't no hallucination or dream, girl. Isabel felt the strain of keeping the psychic contact. Wilkins wanted her out of his head and was trying to shove her out. I need to know what happened down here, Isabel said. Wilkins grew more agitated. Ain't nothing happened down here. Terrell Swanson's ghost chased you into town, Isabel said. Don't know what you're talking about. Wilkins turned from her and started for the door. You killed Swanson, Isabel accused. You killed him and you buried him behind that wall. Wilkins wheeled on her. Rage and madness made a harsh mask of his face. You'd best be watching what you're saying, girl. He took a pack of cigarettes and a lighter from his pocket, stuck a cigarette between his lips, and lit up. The lighter's flame burnished his hard, wrinkled leather features and danced in his crazed gaze. Why did you dig Swanson out of the wall? Isabel asked. Don't know what you're talking about, Wilkins said sullenly. He put the lighter away and held on the cigarette and made the coal glow orange, then exhaled a cloud of smoke into the basement that hung in the still air. Something happened, Isabel said. What made things change? Swanson had been walled up for almost 30 years. Wilkins turned to the basement door. I expect the next person you're going to be talking to is my attorney. Isabel stood helplessly watching, not knowing what to do as Wilkins' hand closed on the doorknob. Then a thunderous, sonorous boom echoed through the basement. Wilkins cursed and yanked on the doorknob, but the door wouldn't open. The thunderclaps continued in regular syncopation. Wilkins continued fighting the door and cursing loudly. Isabel gazed across the room, trying to find the source of the sound and couldn't. Giving up on the door, Wilkins turned around, the cigarette tumbling from his lips as he stared in wide-eyed fear. He gazed around the basement and pressed his back against the door. Can't get out this time, just like the last time. What is that noise? Isabel asked. Wilkins glared at her, but the effort came off weak because there was so much fear in his eyes. Don't you know what that is? The rhythmic booms continued, and now Isabel could tell there was a before and after sound of the double pump blast. She could hear the constriction, the boom, and the letting go. It's a heartbeat, she whispered, and the realization left her dry mouth with anxiety, even though she knew she was only dream-walking and the events weren't actually going on. It's a heartbeat, Wilkins agreed. It's Swanson's heartbeat. The pulse beat more loudly. Wilkins would have sworn the walls pushed in and out with the sound of it. He's alive, you see? Wilkins sounded stunned. He stared at the opposite basement wall. Walled up almost 30 years over there, and somehow he's alive. Isabel remembered Valenti's story about the skeleton lying in torn and tattered clothing on the basement floor. But he can't be alive. Wilkins shot Isabel a desperate look. I caved his head in, took a short half hammer and done the job myself. The strike was rich, you see, an uranium strike, and it was bigger than anything we'd ever found. I know it could make a man rich, but I knew it could only make one man rich. I wanted that man to be me. He shifted his gaze back to the wall. So I killed him, and he didn't die. 30 years. He's been waiting to get back at me. Isabel wanted to speak, but was afraid to interrupt Wilkins' dream sequence. The answers were here. She just had to wait for them. Swanson's heartbeats got louder, Wilkins said, walking as if in a daze across the basement. I heard him for days. Just listen to him. Couldn't turn this TV or radio up loud enough to get rid of them. Couldn't get drunk enough to forget them. They just stayed right there, and wasn't anybody could hear them but me. I hear them, Isabel stated quietly. Swanson ain't coming after you, girl, Wilkins said. It's me he wants. He wants to drag me into that grave with him, but I ain't gonna let him. His face turned hard, but the fear remained intact. I'm gonna take him out of that wall, show him I ain't afraid of him, then I'm gonna bust him up into kindling. Isabel stared at the wall. Despite the fact that she knew there was only Wilkins' memory, anxiety still tingled within her. She couldn't be hurt here, but that knowledge didn't seem as convincing as she'd hoped. Wilkins took up a pickaxe from the basement floor and attacked the wall with a vengeance. Concrete chips spun free of the wall and shot in all directions. Pain fired for Isabel as one of the chips slammed into her left cheek. When she touched her face, her fingers came away wet with blood. Nothing like that had ever happened. Suddenly, the journey back to Michael's house seemed like an impossible distance. She turned and walked to the door. Her hand slid around the doorknob as she twisted. The knob turned, but the lock didn't disengage. She was trapped. Max sat at Michael's couch and watched Isabel sleeping. His stomach knotted into a ball. Hey, looking up, Max saw Liz standing beside him. She'd come over to him and he hadn't even noticed. She'll be fine, Liz said. Isabel knows what she's doing. Max looked at Liz. Do you really think so? Hesitation showed on Liz's face. I don't know what to think anymore. All of this, Max, she took a deep breath and let it out. All of this so far over our heads. I don't even know when the last time was that I felt like we could deal. Glancing around the room, Max saw Michael and Maria talking quietly in the kitchen, picking pepperoni slices from the leftover pizza. Valenti stood by the door like he was just about to go out and do something, but his attention was riveted on the television. News stories of people who had seen ghosts in Roswell continued to interrupt television programming. Kyle sat nearby on the floor, his injured arm elevated as he dozed. I know, Max said. It's always been kind of complicated. He shook his head. I had no right bringing you into this. You didn't bring me into this, Liz said. You saved me that day in the crash down. I should have stopped there, Max said. When you came back around asking questions, I should have just walked away. You couldn't do that, Liz told him. Max looked into her eyes and felt as if he were standing on the edge of a cliff. No, I tried. Life's complicated, Liz said. Maybe yours is a little more complicated than others, but I'm sure it could be worse. I don't know. Roswell seems to be full of ghosts because of us. No, the ghosts were coming. We may be able to help. Liz nodded towards the television. Those people out there don't have a clue, Max. Riverdog doesn't know what to do. He told you that. But you and Michael and Isabel, maybe you three can do something about this. Maybe you were meant to. I hope so, Max said. There was a lot more than he hoped for, but he didn't dare put those thoughts into words. No matter how complicated your life gets, Liz said, putting her hand inside his, I'll be there for you. Max looked at her, elation pushing up through him and overpowering the hopelessness and fatigue that had been dogging him. You will? Yes, Liz said. That's what friends do. Friends. The word dropped like an anvil through Max's stomach. Sour bile rose to the back of his throat, but he managed to swallow it back down. Friends. Could he just be friends when he wanted so much more? Then he felt guilty. After the way he treated Liz, he had no reason to expect anything more. In fact, he should be grateful that she was still willing to be his friend. Max tried to speak, but couldn't. The effort hurt, and he knew his words would come out strained. Instead, he squeezed her hand reassuringly. Max, Liz said, her voice soft and low. Max turned his attention to her, but before she could continue, Isabel jerked violently on the couch. A low moan escaped her lips. Releasing Liz's hand, Max leaned up on his knees and searched Isabel's face. Her features contorted in fear or pain. Max wasn't sure. Isabel, Max called softly, not wanting to wake her too abruptly. Isabel. Isabel moaned again, then jerked and tried to roll. Max caught his sister before she tumbled from the couch. What's wrong? Valenti asked, suddenly at Max's side. I don't know, Max said. Isabel jerked and convulsed, moaning again. Isabel, Max said. Come on. Come on back, Isabel. Isabel stood with her back to the locked basement door. She wanted to go back to Michael's house, but she knew she might not get another chance to dreamwalk Leroy Wilkins. The answer to some of what faced them lay in this room. She was certain of that. Wilkins hauled back the pickaxe again, and then threw the gleaming point forward, digging the pick into the wall. Concrete shattered and broke. Sparks leapt from the contact, buzzing out like burning embers. The old man gasped for breath, sounding like a bellows in the enclosed space. But the maddening thump of the heartbeat continued. Isabel forced herself to stay when everything in her wanted to go. The pick passed through the concrete wall with a metallic crunch. Wilkins gave an insane whoop of glee. I got you now, Swanson, I got you now. You ain't gonna crawl out of that grave and come for me some night. I'm gonna finish the job I started all those years ago. I'm gonna put you back in the ground, and you're gonna stay there. Fractures spread across the concrete surface, marking out the roughly rectangular shape the body had been hidden behind. Chunks of rock fell onto the basement floor at Wilkins' feet. Once the hole was made, Wilkins dropped the pickaxe and seized the sledgehammer. He beat at the opening in the wall, smashing it wider and taller. The battery-powered camp lantern threw a golden glow over the skeleton dressed in rags within the makeshift tomb. The thumping of the monstrous heartbeat reached a crescendo, and the deafening noise vibrated inside Isabel. It wasn't him, Wilkins cried. Dropping the sledgehammer, the old man reached into the hole and hauled the corpse out. The weight was too much for Wilkins, though, and the dead man slipped free of his grip. The corpse clattered to the basement floor, raising a small gust of dust that eddied in the illumination given off by the camp lantern. Isabel watched as Wilkins backed away from the dead man. That heartbeat wasn't him, Wilkins shouted over the thundering thump. Heartbeat wasn't him at all. I thought it was, but you can see for yourself. He ain't got no heart. Through the ragged shirt that was stained with old blood, Isabel looked at Swanson's empty ribcage. It was true. The man had no heart. Where was the heartbeat coming from? Was the noise just Wilkins' guilt finally catching up to him? It wasn't Swanson, Wilkins said. It was that bug that he kept at his throat. What bug? Isabel asked. She had to work hard not to get grossed out. The bones were filled with old spider webs, and the husks of dead spiders knotted up inside the silken strands. Me and him, Wilkins said. We found this bug, a little metal bug. We found it at a dig site. Wasn't nothing there. No gold, no uranium, no copper. Wasn't nothing there but dirt. And that bug he kept in that leather pouch at his throat. He thought the bug was something the Messalito made. The bug was dead. As dead as Swanson. His eyes dropped to the corpse. Only now the bug ain't dead, is it? Swanson ain't dead either. Spotting the leather pouch of the dead man's neck, Isabel recognized the article as the one Valenti had shown them back in Michael's house. Valenti had said something had torn through the leather. As she watched a gleaming silver thread poke through the side of the leather bag. Involuntarily, Isabel took a step back. The silver thread worked quickly, joined by other silver threads, all of them clenching and unclenching furiously, like the segmented legs of a wasp. In seconds, the side of the leather bag ripped out, leaving a ragged edge. A silver shape emerged, balanced on thread-thin legs. The improbable insect creature had the characteristics of a spider and a wasp. It spread two of the thread-like appendages, and a diaphanous foil wing pulled taut between them. The creature leaped and hopped as if trying to launch itself into the air, but never succeeded. I tried to kill it. Wilkins crept forward from the shadows clinging to the wall. He took a fresh grip on the sledgehammer and raised the heavy head high. I tried to kill it, and that's when Swanson come to life again. Before he could bring the sledgehammer down, a ghostly form drew up from the tangled scatter of bones and rotting clothing. The man was taller than Wilkins and thin as a rail. He wore an eye patch and a hard expression. You killed me, Leroy Wilkins, the ghost accused, leveling an accusatory finger. You killed me, and I ain't come to kill you back. And I come to kill you back. Moving with unnatural speed, the ghost closed on Wilkins with fists upraised and ready to strike. Wilkins cowered against the back wall. Using her power, Isabel tried to erase memory of the ghost from the dreamwalk connection. Instead, the ghost froze in mid-run. The ghost probably wasn't, Isabel decided, much less scary frozen than it was while in motion. Offering mute testimony to that fact, Wilkins cringed against the wall. He mewed plaintively, hiding behind his raised hands and arms. Mr. Wilkins, Isabel called softly. She approached the man cautiously, knowing he might attack her because he was so afraid. It's not Swanson, the old man whispered hoarsely, but it is. He wants to kill me. This isn't real, Mr. Wilkins, Isabel said. This is just a memory, a dream. This isn't happening. You don't have to be afraid. Wilkins peered at her angrily. You'd be afraid, too, if you had one of those things hunting you. They're devils, come from hell itself to bring Swanson back to get me. You've seen it. It's not real. It was. Wilkins stared at the frozen ghost. It was real enough then, and it will be real again. You can't stop them. Isabel glanced at the ghost. Did it just move? She wasn't certain, but she believed Kyle had been right when he suggested that the creatures were able to read minds, or at least were able to access a person's subconscious and find an image that would terrify him or her. She turned her attention back to Wilkins. Where exactly was the site where you found the bug? Didn't turn out to be nothing but a placer mine, Wilkins said. Only had a spot of color, nothing a man could make any money at. Where, Mr. Wilkins? Isabel persisted. Without warning, the ghost surged free of its frozen state, even though Isabel knew the ghost hadn't broken free of her control on its own, and that actually Wilkins had taken back control of the dream walk. A surge of fear still slammed through her at the sight of it. She knew the ghost couldn't hurt her, and still she was scared. Wilkins screamed as the ghost grabbed him. The sound of a beating heart filled the basement again, but the beats were somehow different this time. Isabel grabbed at the ghost's shoulder, intending to pull the thing off the old man. Instead, her hands passed through the ghost. She tried again, reaching for Wilkins this time, but only met with the same result. Ghost and man were both intangible to her. Mr. Wilkins, Isabel stepped within arm's reach of the old man. Mr. Wilkins, I need to know where you and Swanson found the bug. Without warning, the battery-powered camp lantern dimmed so much that the basement walls could no longer be seen. In the next instant, Isabel was standing in a deep black space with no way to orient herself. For all she knew, the world had ceased to exist. The ghost slowly faded away like smoke lifting from a field when the wind changed. Wilkins remained against the wall, screaming and crying out for help, and the heartbeat ceased thundering. Voices tumbled out of the darkness, frantic and practiced, all at the same time. Code blue, I've got a code blue. His heart stopped. Start CPR. CPR started. Wilkins crumpled to a fetal position. Tears glistened on his face as his rheumy eyes sought Isabel's out. I'm scared, he whispered. I don't want to go. Isabel didn't know what to say. He's in full arrest, a far-off voice said. Guy's old, someone else said. Even if we save him, we could do a lot of damage here. We're breaking ribs. Give me the paddles. Isabel listened to the voices, thinking it had to be a television episode playing in the background. She wanted to leave. Don't go, Wilkins begged. I don't want to be alone. Isabel shook her head. I can't help you, she whispered. There are people in the hospital. They can help you. They're helping you now. It's too late, Wilkins said. They can't help me. Clear, someone shouted from what sounded like 1,000 miles away. I don't know what to do, Isabel said. Stay with me, Wilkins asked desperately. The darkness shuddered around Isabel. Nothing, someone said. We're going again. Clear. Another shudder passed through the darkness, and this time it claimed Leroy Wilkins, blotting him from Isabel's view in a heartbeat. She stood alone in the darkness and felt it pull at her. Then she tried to slip out of the dream walk and return to her body in Michael's house. Tried to feel Michael's battered sofa against her body. She couldn't. She was still stuck in the dream walk. Suddenly, a pool of blackness, darker than anything Isabel had ever seen, opened up near her. Irresistibly, like a moth drawn to a flame, she was pulled to it. Isabel Evans. The voice sounded familiar, but Isabel couldn't place it. She tried to turn around, but the dark pool floating before her kept drawing her in. A hand caught hers, pulling her back and around. As she turned, she saw Riverdog standing before her. Come, Riverdog said. There's not much time. Isabel found she was freed from the pull of the pool. What about Leroy Wilkins? His time in this place is done, Riverdog said. You can do nothing for him. He must make his peace in the next world, and we can only mourn him and pray for him. Isabel fell into step with Riverdog, amazed at the way the black shadows suddenly gave way to a moonlight-kissed desert landscape. Another step, and she was running, feeling the sand crunch under her feet. Where are we going? Isabel asked. I have found the spirits, Riverdog answered, and they have found me. How did you find me? Isabel said. Getting into the dream walk she'd had with Wilkins wasn't possible. At least she hadn't thought it was possible from everything she knew about her power. Then again, she didn't totally understand everything she did. She just accepted that she could do it. I am on a vision quest, Isabel Evans, Riverdog responded. Despite his age, he loped easily through the desert. A nocturnal desert cottontail exploded from the shadow of a cactus and hopped fiercely along the moonlit escape. landscape, escaping back into the night. Isabel watched the small creature for a moment, feeling disorientated and no longer in control. However, from the time that she had joined Riverdog, she could also feel the connection to her body in Michael's house again. She could be back there in a split second, and she knew it. The animals can sense us, Riverdog said. It's not unheard of. In a vision quest, a traveler of the people is closest to nature. The spirits aren't ghosts, Isabel said. No, Riverdog agreed. They are travelers, not unlike you and your brother and your friend. From another place? Yes, Riverdog ran harder. We must hurry. If they find that I'm talking to you, they may prevent it. Why are they haunting your people? Isabel asked. Why are they haunting Roswell? Now that they have awakened from their long sleep, they feel they must protect themselves. Come, we must hurry. Riverdog picked up the pace, still holding on to her hand. Only a few steps later, Isabel saw they were running for the edge of a cliff high above the desert floor. Riverdog showed no intention of stopping. Cliff, Isabel warned. It doesn't matter, Riverdog said, pulling her toward the edge. Resisting the impulse to dig in her heels and stop, Isabel ran with Riverdog. If worse came to worse, she could always end the dream walk and be safe back in Michael's house. 2 more steps and she was suddenly out over a 50-foot drop. She fell. But even as she tumbled earthward, a change came over her. She stared at her arms as feathers suddenly jutted out, and in the next instant her arms became wings. Come, Riverdog said from beside her. Isabel looked at him, finding that he had become an owl. She saw her own reflection in his great moons of eyes. She was an owl as well, and her fear was mixed with apprehension and childish glee that she would never have owned in front of Max or Michael. Instinctively, she stretched out her wings and caught the air. A couple of wing strokes, and she climbed into the night sky, following Riverdog. Come, Riverdog cried, putting on speed in a burst of flapping wings. Isabel followed as smoothly as though she'd been shifting shapes all her life. It's chapter 16. Allie, you good for chapter 17?
And you changed into a bird? Isabel stared at Michael. An owl, she corrected him. She sat on his couch in his house, feeling a little lightheaded from all the exertion of doing the dream walking. I was just going to say, bye, Jody. I was reading what she said. Okay. Where was I? Okay, same difference, Michael said with a shrug. When you put it like that, Maria said, the whole dream walk loses some of the coolness effect. Michael looked at Maria. Turning into a bird is cool. Not just any bird, Isabel said again. An owl. And yes, it was cool. Good for you, Michael said. How does that help us? Isabel stood with Max's help. Riverdog showed me his cave, and where the travelers took him. They captured him? Valenti asked. In a way, Isabel said. Her legs grew more steady. His body is where he left it, but they have his mind. Actually, they only think they have Riverdog's mind. They don't know he was talking to me. Come on, I'll explain on the way. Max rode shotgun in Valenti's SUV, staring into the lights of oncoming cars and feeling his eyes burn as if they were being microwaved. Anxiety thrummed within him. Valenti drove a sedate 5 miles over the speed limit, handling the vehicle effortlessly. So far, they'd passed 2 state police cars, a truck from the sheriff's department, and 5 Hummers filled with National Guardsmen. The radio and the scanner mounted under the dash continued to report poltergeist activity in and around Roswell. Law enforcement and military teams were responding. The area of effect is getting larger, Valenti commented. Max nodded. Reports were coming in from the other side of Roswell now. At the rate of progression, the ghosts would be haunting other cities besides Roswell by morning. Is Isabel back with us yet? Turning, Max gazed into the back seat. Maria, Isabel, and Liz were sandwiched into the rear seat. Michael and Kyle sat hunkered on the rear deck. Isabel sat between the 2 other girls. She was asleep, dream-walking again, getting more information from Riverdog that they would need to confront the travelers. No, Max answered. Before he could stop himself, he gazed out the window, looking for owls flying through the dark night sky. It was silly, he supposed. Maybe Isabel dreamed that she was an owl when she was with Riverdog in the dream walk, but she didn't actually turn into one. The car's greenish instrument lights painted Valenti's face in hard lines. Do you believe she's really talking to Riverdog, or do you think those things, the travelers, are setting us up, passing themselves off as Riverdog to her? Max only thought about the question for a moment. She's talking to Riverdog. Isabel would know if she wasn't. Not so sure, Valenti said. Today I saw the ghost of a woman I never thought I'd see again. Most people around here don't even remember her murder. If the travelers can find that out, maybe they do a pretty good river dog imitation too. No, Max said. Isabel would know. We could be headed into a trap. Max nodded. We're headed into their stronghold. Trap or no trap, I don't think it gets any worse than that. Valenti was silent for a moment. The scary part is, you're probably right. But we don't have a choice, Max said. If we don't try to stop this, events in the Mesalico village in Roswell are going to get worse. He paused. This situation has already attracted the attention of the government agencies. They may get interested in setting up an operation in Roswell again. The last one had almost caught them all, and would have if Niceto hadn't stepped in. Max, Valenti said softly, I don't think the government agencies ever got uninterested. Max looked at him. It's nothing I've heard or seen, Valenti said, but I've been around government agencies a lot lately. Got a really close look only a few months ago. Maybe not as close a look as you did. Max silently agreed with that. He would never forget the things he had been subjected to in the White Room, where he'd been held. Government people like that, Valenti said, never really give up. They just go away for a while, till they find a new angle to use. Then they start all over again, digging and prying and pulling till something busts free. That's kind of downbeat, don't you think? Maria commented from the back seat. Valenti sighed. Maybe it's the way things have been going on, or maybe it's just me. Kyle's been trying to tell me that I'm carrying around too much negative energy these days. Max gazed at the front windshield. The instrument illumination created a reflection in the glass. He stared at Liz's image as she looked through one of the side windows. Maybe it would be better if a government agency or the military handled this, Maria suggested. We could tip them off. No, Valenti said. You've seen the government at work. Whatever these travelers are, a federal agency's first impulse is going to be to learn how to control them, to see if they can use the travelers. I don't know whether to be more concerned about them being able to control these things or not being able to control them. He's right, Max said. We'll do this ourselves. If we can. If Isabel and River Dog can come up with enough information for us to act on. Just knowing the location of the travelers wasn't going to be enough. That might only be enough to get them killed. On owl's wings again, Isabel glided over the desert landscape. She had an owl's eyesight as well, and her vision turned the night into a confluence of light and dark that she could see through as easily as if it were bright as day. She rode the dying thermals instinctively now, surprised at how quickly she learned the basics of winged flight. Of course, it was a dream walk. Pretty much anything she imagined in a dream walk was possible. Kyle had found that out when they'd experimented with a Playboy playmate from an issue of the magazine. However, Kyle hadn't found out as much as he'd wanted to about wish fulfillment. Isabel's keen eyesight picked out River Dog sitting atop a ridge near where his physical body lay in a coma. Yet he was miles away from the place where the travelers thought they had him trapped. If she had time to think too much about the situation, Isabel knew she could get confused. On the ridge below, River Dog raised his hand in salutation. Dropping a wing, Isabel lost altitude, stopping short of an actual plummet. The approach she had to take to reach River Dog was different from the one she had used in the other dream walks she'd undertaken. Usually in those, all she'd had to do was link her mind with the persons she sought. But to get to River Dog, she'd had to journey. Almost on top of River Dog, Isabel stretched out a wing to his outstretched right hand. Her feathers brushed his hand, and by the time her feet touched the ground, her feathers were fingers. He helped her step down from the air. Thank you, Isabel said. River Dog inclined his head. You have returned. Yes. The way was not difficult? No. I had to look for you, though. That's not something I usually have to do. River Dog let out a long breath, and the chill filling the desert night turned his breath misty gray. You have brought the others? They're on their way, Isabel assured him. We're on our way. You told them the danger was grave. Yes. Many would not take on such a dangerous undertaking. We didn't feel we had a choice, Isabel said. I think you felt the same way. That was why you came up into the mountains, looking for travelers. Perhaps, River Dog agreed. We don't have much time, Isabel said. What have you found out? During their last conversation, River Dog had let her know that the part of him held by the travelers was learning things from the travelers that they weren't aware of. And in turn, when his other self knew about the travelers, the part of him that he kept involved in the vision quest knew about them as well. However, his conversation with Isabel was kept separate from the part of him that the travelers kept captive. The travelers came here a long time ago, Riverdog, in the before time when even the Chinese had not begun marking the days. The travelers were on their way back from a battle that spanned incredible distances across space when their ship failed. Until that failure, the travelers were able to jump from star to star. Isabel committed the story to memory, knowing she would have to tell Max and the others. The travelers were supposed to hold their position, Riverdog went on, until help arrived and the ship could be repaired or abandoned. Whichever became necessary. They were not allowed to remain there because their enemy, a ferocious band of warriors, didn't allow them to. They fled, making a final jump with their faulty star engine. When they reappeared in what they considered normal space, their ship was crippled worse than before. First, they were trapped by the pull of the moon. Then, as they came around the moon, the earth caught them and pulled them in. They slammed into the desert here, arriving as a flaming comet. Gradually, the sands of the desert pulled the wreckage down into the earth where I showed you. How were you talking to them? Isabel asked, amazed at the wealth of information that the old man had accumulated. By the same means they are talking to me, Riverdog answered. It is all part of the vision quest. Perhaps the Mesaliko who first encountered the travelers learned it from them. Or perhaps the Mesaliko taught the vision quest to the travelers. How many travelers are there? Isabel asked. Riverdog shook his head. I don't know. I have asked them about this, but the answer is confusing. I know there are many, but they say there is only one. The drones are questioning me at the moment. The drones? Isabel asked. The little metal bugs, like the one the corpse in Leroy Wilkins' basement had in the bag around his neck? Yes, Riverdog replied. There are thousands of them, like ants in an anthill. I've seen them, but since the 4 travelers came for me in the cave, I haven't seen any more of them. They are content to let the drones deal with me and the problems I present. You never said how they found you. Riverdog hesitated for a moment. I think it was the vision quest. Once they found me, they didn't want to let me go. They still don't. Without warning, Riverdog's image flickered into and out of existence in rapid syncopation. Concern darkened his features as he turned away from Isabel. You need to go, he whispered hoarsely, and his voice carried scratchy white noise. They have found you, Isabel. The drones have found you. If they are able, they will destroy you and your friends. I'll be back, Isabel promised. We're on our way. Then she let herself be pulled from the dream walk and back into her body. In the dark reflection against the windshield, Max saw Isabel stir and come awake. She pushed herself forward, staring down the highway. They're coming, she said. Who? Valenti snapped. The drones, Isabel answered. What drones? Valenti asked. The insect things, Isabel said. Like the spider thing I saw in the hospital, Kyle said. And like I saw when I dream-walked Leroy Wilkins, Isabel said. Max peered at the road, wondering if he'd even be able to see the small creatures. What are the drones? Tiny robots, Isabel replied. Travelers have been using them to spy on the Mesaliko and Roswell. Spy gear, Michael said. And weapons, Isabel said. Riverdog says the ship is filled with drones. They were responsible for repairing the ship. So have you seen the travelers? Maria asked. Isabel shook her head. Riverdog said 4 of them entered the cave and captured him. I thought you said Riverdog was in a prayer cave or something, Liz said. Max saw his sister's brow furrow in frustration. Riverdog is in the cave, Isabel said. He thought they took him too, but it was all an illusion. They became forceful with him, trying to find more weaknesses and superstitions to use against the Mesaliko and the people in Roswell. And he found he was still in the vision quest. She pointed. There's a road up there, off to the right. It's a dirt road. You'll need to take it. They captured Riverdog in his vision quest? Maria asked. Yes, Isabel said. A psychic captive, Kyle said. More or less, Isabel agreed. Then Riverdog hasn't even been to this downed alien ship, Valenti said. I've seen it, Isabel said. Valenti glanced at her in the review mirror. All right, I'm reading right now. I'll be back. Sorry, guys. Hold on. Valenti glanced at her in the rearview mirror. I don't mean to insult you, Isabel, but you've only seen what you thought was an alien spacecraft. The Traveler's spacecraft while you were dreamwalking Riverdog. It's the only plan we have, Max stated quietly. If the Travelers have Riverdog captive, how did he get away? Valenti asked. He pulled onto the dirt road when Isabel pointed again. At the speed he was traveling, the tires slid through the dirt for just a moment. then grabbed traction again and hurtled them down the road. When I dreamwalk, the things I see are real. You know that. You know that. That's how we found Lori Dupree in Fraser Woods. Nobody, Max noticed, said anything about that. Lori Dupree's salvation had come at a cost to all of them in the long run. How can Riverdog be in 3 different places at the same time? Maria asked. When I leave my body on a dreamwalk, Isabel said, part of my mind stays with my body, keeps the autonomous system going. Maria looked over the seat at Michael. The autonomous system keeps the heart and lungs functioning while you're sleeping, she said, and other things. Michael gave her a sour look. I knew that. Maybe, Isabel said. In time I could learn to do what Riverdog has done, and split off another part of my conscious mind, so I can be in 2 places at one time. A doppelganger, Kyle said. Another self? Some of the out-of-body experience people talk about that. A psychic clone, Michael suggested. A master-slave system the way computers are set up, Maria said. Doesn't matter, Valenti said. We'll have to accept that Riverdog is in more than 2 places. However, he's doing it. Max stared into the darkness ahead. Off-road now, Valenti's SUV sped across the dirt road, raising a giant fog of dust that trailed after them like a predatory beast. Metal glimmered in the night, turning dusky gold from the SUV's headlights and occasional silver from the moon. There, he said, pointing. Valenti looked at the tiny shimmering bits of silver and gold. It could be dust picked up by the headlights. Then the cloud of spots shifted directions, whipping around and heading on an interception course with the SUV. Or not, Michael said. The eeriness of the attack, Max decided, was the absolute quiet. The shimmering things closed rapidly, changing direction as if gravity had no effect on them. Hugging the terrain, they sped for the SUV without hesitation. How did they find us? Valenti asked. I don't know, Isabel answered. How did Riverdog know? There wasn't time to ask. Doesn't matter, Michael said. Just keep the speed up. What are those tiny things going to do? Shatter against the truck? They are stupid. They don't think, Isabel said. They were designed to react. Tensely, Max watched as the drones unerringly closed in on the SUV. The cloud of attackers was broken up into patches like formations. In the next instant, the lead formation smashed into the truck. The drone sounded like grit in a sandstorm, peppering the SUV's body. Metallic pings echoed hollowly inside the truck, sounding virtually inoffensive. Then Max spotted the tears in the sheet metal of the hood, just before the first of the drones smacked into the windshield. More drones struck the windshield, penetrating into the glass. Spider-webbed fractures ran across the glass instantly. As the safety glass broke into cubes the way it was designed to do, some of them blasted over Max and Valenti. The glass cubes weren't harmful, but they served to let Max know that the windshield wasn't going to stand up to the battering. If the attack kept up, the drones were going to tear through the glass and rip like arrows into the flesh and blood targets on the other side. Max, Isabel called, maintaining control with effort. Understanding, Max threw up his hand. Energy and blue-white light pulsed from his hand, creating the force field he'd used before. He started with a surface on the other side of the windshield, watching as the drones struck the shield and burst into brief sparking wisps that died almost at once and sounded like popcorn popping. Valenti cursed, not at all happy with how close the attack had come. One of the SUV's headlights burst in a muffled explosion. Max kept the shield in place, straining himself and making the protective surface bigger, bending it until it became a bubble that protected them all the way around. Keeping the shield intact while aboard a moving vehicle made it even harder. The SUV slowed slightly. Drive, Max said. People, Valenti groaned. There are people ahead. Gazing ahead, trying to keep focused enough to maintain the force field, Max saw figures suddenly lurch and stumble from the shadows. The single cone of light that remained from the SUV's headlights played over the swaying figures of men and women. Blood covered their faces. Some of them were missing arms and legs, and others dragged their broken bodies with their hands.
All right. Chapter 18. Frickin' zombies. Michael griped from the back of the SUV. Looking at the sprawling group of undoubtedly dead people who filled the dirt road ahead, Max silently agreed. The zombies turned like a pack of predators and started toward the SUV, even though it was racing toward them. Max kept the energy shield in place, aware that more drones smashed to pieces against the glowing barrier. Valenti pulled his foot from the accelerator and shoved down on the brake. The SUV stuttered across the uneven surface of the dirt road, scratching up bigger clouds of dust. Realizing that the vehicle wasn't going to stop in time, Valenti started cutting the wheels, slewing the SUV sideways. "Max," Liz called, "I don't see anything. I don't see any zombies." Shuddering again across the rough dirt road, the SUV rocked to a stop. The motor growled. A cloud of dust caught up in their backdraft, suddenly blew by them, playing out like a wave crashing up onto the beach. Max kept the force field in place with effort. The number of drones shattering against the energy barrier were almost non-existent, but some still came, leaving miniature fireworks to mark their destruction. Beyond the energy barrier, though, the zombies lurched towards the SUV. "You see them, don't you, Max?" Valenti asked, stared at the crowd of dead people. "You see them?" "Yeah," Max said, "but we've got to get out of here." Valenti threw the transmission in reverse, looked over her shoulder, and floored the accelerator. The SUV bucked in protest, but the tires slashed through the desert dust and caught hold of the road. "No," Max said, "they're not real." He put his hand on Valenti's shoulder. Valenti hesitated, braking again. He stared at the approaching figures. "They're real, Max." "No, it's an illusion." Valenti shook his head weakly. "Think about it," Max said. "You have to know those people. Who are they?" Valenti wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Accident victims. People I've seen die are already dead along the highways. Automobile accidents, fires, murders, and suicides. All those people died hard. They can't all be here," Max said. "This isn't real." "It looks real." "This isn't real," Max repeated calmly. "Dad," Kyle spoke from the back, "I can't see anything. Nothing's there but an empty road." "The drones are trying to scare us off," Max stated, staring Valenti in the eye, "just like they're trying to scare off the Mesoliko and the people in Roswell." He reached out and slipped the transmission into drive. "We go through them. We're not stopping. We're too close to quit, and we may be the only chance there is to shut this down." Valenti wiped his mouth again. His eyes looked fever bright. He nodded. Okay, let's get this done." He put his foot on the accelerator and roared forward again. Straining, brain hurting from the effort required to maintain the energy shield, Max watched as the SUV barreled down on the lurching zombies, reaching toward them with outstretched arms. "Not real," Valenti said under his breath, barely audible over the roaring engine. "Damn it, they're not real." Max halfway expected the zombies to disappear when his force field touched them. Instead, the zombies passed through the energy barrier and hurled themselves at the SUV. Valenti started to take his foot from the accelerator. Max grabbed the steering wheel with his left hand and jammed his left foot on top of Valenti's foot, keeping the accelerator pinned to the floorboard. "No," Max said, "we're going through." Incredibly, the zombies caught hold of the SUV. They clung to the vehicle and peered in with dead eyes through the shattered glass as they writhed and tried to crawl through. A woman with half her face missing stared at Max. Almost unnerved himself, despite knowing that drones would create the illusion, Max stopped projecting the force field and reached for Valenti. He pressed his palm against Valenti's temple, thinking that if the drones were using whatever powers they had against Valenti, that the force had to somehow be neural, biological, or chemical in nature. As such, he hoped the effort was compatible with his healing powers. He poured energy into Valenti's mind, feeling the wrongness there like a thorn embedded in tender flesh. The thorn held for only a moment before his healing touched, then it crumbled. As soon as the thorn vanished and Max couldn't feel it anymore, the zombies disappeared as well. He took his hand away from Valenti's temple. Glancing around, Valenti said, "Not real. They weren't real after all." "No," Max said, slumping tiredly back into the seat. He scanned the night for more of the drones, but didn't see any. "Not much farther," Isabel said. "One more turn and we're going to be on foot." Max got out of the SUV at the base of the tall hill Isabel's directions brought them to. The encounter with Valenti's zombies was 5 miles back, and now they were at the end of even the dirt trail they'd been able to use. The forlorn promontory was all windswept rock, a place apart even in the isolated desert. The moonlit silvered the sand, but the ridge left a lake of shadows where it blocked the moon's glow. The wind moaned in the distance, racing across the broken terrain as dark clouds scudded and obscured the starlight. "Creepy, huh?" Liz asked. She stood on the other side of the SUV. "Not as creepy as it was the night the storm hit," Michael said as he vaulted from the rear of the SUV. He landed on the sand and was actually smiling a little, like he was enjoying the thought of the coming confrontation. Compared with that, this is practically a walk in the park. But it's not a walk in the park, Max thought. The travelers and the drones were somewhere up ahead. Doors slammed behind them as Valenti and Kyle got out of the SUV. Valenti carried a shotgun. "Not exactly the I come in peace look," Michael commented. Valenti looked a little self-conscious about the shotgun. "Those things aren't exactly the type to go in peace. Figured I'd share a little old-fashioned destruction with them. Fine by me, Michael said. Max looked at them. I don't want anyone hurt. Valenti and Michael stared back at him. Those things weren't exactly rolling out the red carpet back there, Maxwell, Michael growled, and I don't think you'd find that the Mesolito or the general population of Roswell are any too protective of them. The travelers are stranded here, Max pointed out, like we were, like we are. Maybe they had no choice about mixing into the local population and hiding out. Yeah, well, they could have summoned up friendly illusions, Michael said. They're getting back what they've been giving. Max started to argue, feeling tired and frustrated. No matter which way he turned lately, it seemed like he could do nothing right. Everything that he'd seen that was good in his life had slipped through his fingers. He never felt more alone in his life. Michael's right, Max, Liz said. However we do it, the travelers have to be stopped. Valenti stepped forward, snapping on a flashlight. All this talk is putting us behind, and it could just be water under the bridge. If we get up there and have a look at that ship, it's real possible that we're not going to be able to handle it. We may be sending for the military ourselves. He paused, looking around the group. Let's start with a look, then see where that takes us. No one argued with the logic Valenti presented. Max nodded. I've got extra flashlights in the back of the SUV, Valenti said. Let's break them out and get to it. Valenti led the way through the craggy ravines that wind and water cut through the hills in years past. Isabel walked at his side, giving directions as they were needed. Max brought up the rear of the line, watching as Liz and Maria trailed Michael. Kyle followed them, gazing nervously all around. Why aren't they attacking? Kyle asked. Before the words finished echoing slightly through the ravine, a flitting hum filled the chill night air. The sound approached quickly, coming in from ahead of them. Maxwell, Michael called. Only a split second behind in reacting, Max shoved his hands out and poured energy into the force fields. Before the drones reached their position, lightning blasted the rocks in front of the group and thunder exploded from the hillside. Max held the barrier in place, not knowing what would happen if the lightning struck the force field, but knowing only bad things could come of the lightning hitting humans or alien hybrids. Moonlight glinted against the metallic edges of the flying drones. The leading edge of the attack struck the energy barrier and burst into bright sparks. Then a lightning bolt zigzagged into the barrier. Max flew backward, feeling as though he'd been hit in the chest with a sledgehammer. He crashed against the rock wall behind him and felt the wind driven from his lungs. His vision blurred, but he clearly saw that the barrier was no longer there to protect them. Valenti shouldered a shotgun and fired into the mass of drones again and again. The explosions of gunfire echoed through the hillside. The buckshot blew holes through the drones, creating sprays of electrical discharges. Still, dozens of the drones vectored in at the group. Max struggled to project the shield again and couldn't. He couldn't breathe, and he couldn't use his power. Unfazed by the lightning touching down around him and blasting fist-sized craters from the rocky walls of the ravine, Michael stepped forward and raised his hands. His hands pulsed with energy for a heartbeat, then he unleashed the force. Twin funnels of pale blue-white energy sizzled through the air. When the energy bolts touched the drones, they sparked and burst, unleashing still more energy that took out the drones behind them. In seconds, the chain reaction created by Michael's attack left the air clear in an absence of lightning bolts. Wow, Michael said in a low voice. Max wasn't too surprised. He'd seen Michael take out a car with his power before, and the drones were a lot smaller and more fragile. It was the connection between the drones, Isabel said. However, they're tied to one another so that they operate with one mind. That connection pulls Michael's power through them. There must be some kind of electrical bonding. That's how they're able to generate the lightning strikes. Makes them glow up like a string of firecrackers, Michael said. Valenti reloaded the shotgun with shells from his pocket. He glanced at Isabel. How much farther? Not much. Isabel set off quickly, forcing Valenti to hurry and run at her side. Max pushed himself off the rock wall, his breath still rasped in his lungs, and he felt lightheaded. Liz looked back at him. Are you all right? She asked. Max nodded, knowing if she were really concerned, she would be back checking on him. The distance between them in that moment felt absolute. I'm fine, he said, and tried not to let the weakness in his legs and knees show as he lurched into motion after them. He maintained a steady jog, alert to any movement around them that might indicate another group of drones had located them. Riverdog had told Isabel that what one of the drones knew, they all knew. Only a few moments later, they reached a jagged tear in the hillside. The opening looked more like a wound than the mouth to a cave. Below, following the line of the grade, a mass of stones and dirt stood out against the desert sand. Some of the dirt still looked damp and dark, like it had been only just dug out. They'd been working to free the ship. Isabel played her light over the cave mouth. No one comes out here often, so they haven't been discovered. How long have they been working? Max asked. Since the attack, Isabel answered. Max shone his flashlight into the gullet of the cave. According to Riverdog, that attack took place thousands of years ago. The information Riverdog has gotten from the travelers is confusing, Isabel said. The drones and travelers have no concept of how much time has passed. Only that the world around them has changed. Riverdog thinks they were in some kind of hibernation. Were they waiting to be rescued? Kyle asked. Isabel hesitated. Maybe. Guess I didn't know that once you're abandoned. How here you pretty much stay lost, Michael said. Newsflash, Maria said. Does anybody know why they haven't attacked us again? I mean, if we're getting close to their nest or whatever, shouldn't they be all over us? Maybe they're scared, Liz suggested. Evidently, they're not prepared for Michael's powers. Max took a tighter grip on the flashlight he carried. There's only one way to find out. He stepped forward, easing into the cave opening, and fully expecting the drones to attack at any moment. Valenti matched them stride for stride, staying on Max's right and keeping the shotgun at the ready. The beam of their flashlights barely pushed back the black shadows that swelled within the throat of the cavern. How did the spaceship get so buried? Kyle whispered. Riverdog thinks the ship was mostly buried during the initial impact, Isabel replied. After that, the shifting desert buried the ship the rest of the way. Max's flashlight picked up the patches of rusty steel tracks between the dirt, rock, and debris. A small mine car was only a little farther up ahead, overturned near one side of the tunnel. This is one of the dig sites Leroy Wilkins worked, Valenti said. It's on Mesalico lands, so when the tribal police found him here, they bounced him. Maybe this is where Swanson found the drone he wore and the pouch around his neck, Liz said. Could be, Valenti agreed. Swanson was still around back then. Before Valenti's words could die away, the cave throat filled with familiar hum of miniature winds. Max raised his shield, filling the cave with the energy barrier. The drone slammed into the force field and imploded, leaving bright sparks in their after effects. Drop the shield, Maxwell, Michael said, as the drones gathered, obviously trying to regroup. When Max dropped the force field, staying ready to raise another one, Michael zapped the drones with an energy bolt. The mad rush of exploding drones jumped back and forth like a pinball, trapped between bumpers and getting some serious play. As with the last time, none of the drones survived the attack. The tunnel took a long, loping turn to the left. Max only had to follow the tunnel a little longer before he found the ship. At least he found where the ship had to be. The tunnel dead ended against a tall wall scored with pickaxe marks. But in between the pickaxe marks were conical holes that looked slightly like anthills. Entrances, Kyle said. The drones must be using those, but none of them are big enough for us. We're stuck. Max looked at Isabel. Is the ship behind this wall? Yes, I've seen it. In the dreamwalk state, I can walk through that wall. Michael stepped forward. Fine, it's there. All we've got to do is get to it, right? Maybe we should try talking to them first. Max didn't get any further in his suggestion. Michael threw his hands forward. Blue-white energy cascaded from his palms, meeting the wall in a thunderous explosion. The wall fell in sections, revealing a dulled, fire-blasted, and pitted metal surface behind the rock and earth. The whole cavern shook with the force of the energy used. For a moment, Max was afraid that the cavern roof was going to come down. Miraculously, the ceiling held, but clouds of dust filled the cavern while debris rained down. Hacking and coughing, choking on the rolling cloud of smoke around him, Max stared in the cavity that Michael's impulsive actions had revealed. Something slithered within the opening, but he couldn't make out what the thing was because of all the dust and grit in his eyes. Look out, Valenti yelled, pulling the shotgun to his shoulder. Dazed, Max watched incredulously as what looked like a vine sprung from the cavity in the wall, but the flashlight beams that hit the vine struck the metallic surface. Before Max could move, the vine wrapped his feet and yanked, lifting him from the cavern floor. He upended, falling backward and striking his head on a rock. Blackness clouded his vision and took him away. Chapter 18.
Chapter 19. What the heck? Sorry about that. Turn my phone back on and someone's like coyote or something. I'm like, what the heck?
Very for this story, I think. So
it actually fits in with what we're doing, what we're reading. All right, let's see. Max screamed. Fear thudded through her at first, nearly stopping her heart, then making her think it was going to explode. The thing that wrapped Max's lower body looked like a snake, but she'd never seen one that big in the desert. The monstrosity that had captured Max would have dwarfed even South American anacondas. Max, Liz yelled again and started forward. Kyle, Valenti barked. Before Liz could reach Max as he was dragged away, Kyle caught up to her and wrapped his arms around her. He locked down and stopped her, then dragged her back to the safety of the group. Let me go, Liz demanded. Let me go. Valenti's shotgun roared, spitting out a bright yellow muzzle flash. For a moment, Liz was afraid that Valenti had shot Max. Then she saw the tentacle thing break away in a flare of popcorn-sized explosions. That thing's made out of those drones, Maria said. In disbelief, Liz saw that Maria was right. The sporadic flashlight beams, maneuvered by excited hands, crisscrossed the length of the tentacle, revealing the gleaming surface and some of the individual shapes of the drones. Max lay in a loose sprawl on the ground. One of the flashlights revealed the blood gleaming at the back of his head. The severed section of tentacle remained around his lower body, writhing mechanically like an earthworm that had been sliced in half. Max, Liz yelled, straining against Kyle's hold. Oh, God, don't let him be dead. He can't be dead. Michael, Isabel said. Michael raised his hands and stepped forward. Before he was unable to unleash the power he wielded, a dozen lightning strikes strobed into the ground around him, blowing him backward, forcing them all back. Static electricity popped and cracked in the air. Liz shielded her face with her hands. Without warning, the end of the tentacle that did not have Max shot forward and rejoined the severed section. They immediately melded and became one again. Effortlessly, the tentacle lifted Max from the ground and drew him into the hole. He disappeared as Liz watched in horror. Max, Liz pushed free of Kyle, accidentally hurting his injured arm. He yelped in pain. Then she was running, driving herself across the cavern floor. By the time Liz reached the cavity in the wall and looked down, Max was disappearing into the side of the spaceship that was buried inside the hillside. The clouds of dust, stirred up by the tentacle's passage, floated slowly downward as they settled. Tears came to Liz's eyes. Max couldn't be lost to her. Not like that. Not so final. She pointed her flashlight down into the cavity. The spaceship lay embedded in the hill, strata 20 feet down. The excavation that had progressed so far had been meticulous. The sides of the dig area looked like they'd been cut with a laser due to their smooth uniformity. The spaceship metal was a deep blue-green, looked iridescent under the flashlight beam. But partial patches showed obvious burn and impact damage. Judging from what she saw of the spaceship so far, it was huge. She just didn't know how huge. And somewhere inside that ship, Max was hurt and alone. Hey, Michael said, placing a hand on Liz's shoulder. Liz turned and faced him, seeing the worry on his face. The emotion was something she'd seldom seen on Michael's features. He was so strong, so cynical about expecting the worst of situations, and so private that the worry looked out of place. We'll get him back, Michael promised. Now may be the time to call in the military, Kyle said. If we do, Valenti stated grimly, they'll wonder what the travelers wanted with Max. Look, Michael said, I can hurt these things. They know that now, and we know that. They can still hurt us too, Kyle pointed out. Michael shrugged. Suit yourself. I'm going. He turned and started climbing down into the cavern tunnel. Without hesitation, Liz followed. A blinding headache woke Max. He knew he was lying on the ground. A hard surface supported his back. His legs felt bruised from the vine thing, but he didn't feel the constriction around his legs anymore. Slowly, he opened his eyes and took in the surroundings. The smooth metallic walls told him that he was inside the traveler's spaceship. He wondered if Riverdog was still present somewhere, viewing everything from his vision quest. If he was, Max realized, then maybe Isabel and the others would at least know he was all right. An ambient red glow from scattered screens built into the walls and from consoles filled the room. Max had no clue what the consoles were for. For all he knew, this could have been the pilot area or a library aboard the ship. Max turned to the sibilant voice, watching in stunned fascination as a stream of drones flooded into the room and began piling on top of one another. The drones made a tower, building with an unbelievable speed, like a dust storm in reverse. In seconds, the drones went from a pile of small insects to a vaguely human shape. The creature looked like something from a low-budget science fiction movie. What do you want? Max asked, taking a step back. He spotted a door behind him. It was only partially open, 6 steel plates frozen in mid-iris. Evidently, the door dilated to open and constricted to close. The 6 steel plates recessed into the surrounding bulkhead. Sand and rock had poured into the room through the door. Streams of drones worked like ants, carrying off the debris. The creature hesitated. A rippling passed over its face, suddenly creating a mouth. A second later, it opened its eyes. The eyes were hard and shiny, like hard silver marbles. This appearance is more pleasing to you? The creature asked. Why did you bring me here? Max demanded. We wish to speak with you. The figure rippled, like a monitor repixelating, tightening the image and refining the features. Max waited. You're afraid of us, the creature said. Yes, Max said. Why? You've worked hard to be scary, Max said. The creature cocked its head, an altogether human expression that made the thing's alienness even more apparent. We have, it admitted, and the voice almost sounded contrite. Those actions are part of our pre-programmed defense. Our primary functions are the defense and repair of this ship. Who are you? We are, the creature hesitated. Your language remains something of a problem to us. Our dealings with River Dog have been inaccurate and unsatisfying to a degree. Still, we have learned much. The image flickered and refined again, becoming more human. This time, some of the metallic sheen faded, leaving a color much closer to human pigmentation. The color looked pale and unhealthy. You may address us as the builder. Max waited, running his options through his mind. His head still throbbed. Running wasn't a good plan because he didn't know where to go. Scaring the local populations from this area is necessary to the continued survival of our crew, the builder stated. We jettisoned an emergency beacon before entering this planet's atmosphere and gravitational fields. We are awaiting rescue. Max looked at the thing in front of him, watching as the image rippled again and the features became even more human. The eyes had true color now and had turned greenish-gray. How long have you been waiting? Max asked. The builder was silent for a moment. We are not certain. While we were in stasis to conserve power reserves, several systems failed. We have been working to bring those systems back in working order. It's been thousands of years, Max said. We are still here, the builder said. Where is the ship's crew? They are awaiting rescue. Max looked around the room. Where? It doesn't matter, the builder rippled again. The chameleon power of the drones was incredible. In the poor lighting of the room, the creatures that had bonded together looked human. The body language, though somehow off, was still human in its interpretation. I want to talk to one of the ship's crew, Max said. Talking with the ship's crew isn't necessary, the builder replied. You can interface with us. Is someone coming to rescue you? Max asked. The emergency beacon is in place. Have you been in contact with someone? That doesn't concern you. You're hurting people, I know, Max said. You're hurting my town. That concerns me. The builder regarded him. These are not your people, Max. We have seen you. We have scanned you. Your true species is unknown to our databanks, but we know you are not of Earth's stock. These people out there, Max said, they are going to come hunting for you. Nonsense, the builder replied. We will simply scare them away. Our defensive position was programmed not to be overtly lethal. We rely on the primitive fears and superstitions of the mammal species and civilizations that live in this place. They fear the wrath of their dead ancestors. They will recognize this place as sacred and put it apart from the rest of the world. That's not true anymore. The builder regarded him. The civilization you first dealt with had a different way of looking at the world, Max said. The early civilizations accepted the natural world and their place in it. People today investigate things like this. They seek to understand. And they want to control things they don't understand or are different, he thought. No, the builder said. We have adopted the proper defensive mechanisms and approaches. We will protect the crew. You need to talk to one of the crew, Max argued. Do they know what's going on? We are here to care for them and protect them, the builder said. We are not here to bother them while they are involved in their mission. Vague unease stirred within Max. Let me talk to one of the ship's crew. Impossible, the builder replied. Why? The ship's crew has important tasks to perform. They must not be disturbed. We are here to keep them safe and productive. Max made his voice harder, in sensing that something was wrong, but not knowing what. I insist. Request denied, the builder replied. You brought me here for a reason, Max pointed out. You must communicate with your friends for us, the builder said. They must be made to understand that they must leave the ship alone. The crew must not be disturbed. No one must interfere with our rescue. We will be taken back and assimilated into the one. What one? The one that is all of us, the builder said. The one we were separated from to go on this voyage with the crew. The figure paused. We miss ourselves. We miss being whole. I want to see someone from the crew, Max said. You can't. We exist to take care of the crew. We minister to their wants and needs. That makes us worthwhile. Without them, we would be alone more than we are while outside the one. Max's mind worked furiously. He started to see the incongruities in the builder's logic. You must tell the others to leave, the creature said. You're afraid of Michael, aren't you? Max asked. His power destroys you. Your friend endangers this ship, the builder said. He endangers the ship's crew. That will not be tolerated. You were in stasis until a few days ago, Max said. We were conserving power, the builder agreed. Our energy converters had been damaged as well. We decided it would be better if we hibernated with the crew and awaited rescue. Why did you leave hibernation? Because we felt a ship near us, the builder said. We had felt the power surge only a few days ago. The granolith, Max realized. The power the vessel had used to return to the homeworld had been incredible. When the ship took off, the builder said, we were forced to wake. The ship was unknown to us and of alien origin. We knew it was possible that an enemy or potential enemy had found our emergency beacon. We can't rest until we are rescued now. The local communities must be repulsed in the manner in which we repulsed them before. Let me talk to the ship's captain, Max said. The person in charge of the ship is busy, the builder said. Tasks must be completed. Our rescue must be effective. Max stepped forward, quelling the immediate instinct to avoid a confrontation with the creature. The builder shimmered again, adding inches to its height. Stay back. The rapid growth took away some of the humanness of its features. Take me to the ship's crew, Max ordered. The builder shifted suddenly, and the movement was too quick to be human. The humanoid figure seemed to flow from one spot to the next. He stood in front of a closed door that Max hadn't seen in the darkness before. A softly glowing handplate gleamed to one side of the door. You must stay back, the builder said. The creature nodded its hands into fists. If you come any closer, we will be forced to harm you. That is not what we wish. We wish you to be our messenger. Take me to the ship's crew, Max repeated more forcefully. That's impossible. Turning, Max watched Michael step into the room, followed by Valenti, Isabel, Kyle, Liz, and Maria. All of them looked disheveled and worn, caked in dust. Isabel stepped forward. The builder rippled again, flowing with predatory intent toward Isabel. Michael held up his hands, energy coiled around them. Don't, Michael said. I'll fry you where you stand. The builder moved back a step. What do you mean it's impossible to take me to the ship's crew? Max asked. The ship's crew must be protected, the builder said. Screeching hysteria filled the words. There is no ship's crew, Isabel said. Riverdog uncovered the truth and showed me. These things, she looked at Max. They call themselves the Builder, Max said. The Builder has been hiding the crew's loss from themselves in order to keep from going mad. Isabel approached the door the Builder had been protecting. That door is broken, the Builder said. We have not yet gotten it repaired. There has been no need. Isabel waved her hand in front of the plate. The door I rised open, all 6 steel plates retreating effortlessly into the bulkhead. No, the builder shouted, starting forward. Michael shoved an energy bolt forward. The blue-white energy blast cut the builder off at the knees in a series of electrical explosions. Moving quickly, the builders separated into halves, throwing their upper body away from their lower half, managing to save some of themselves. The upper half fell heavily to the dust and debris-covered floor. Even as Max watched, more drones sped to the upper half of the builder's body, adding their masses to the hive organism. The builder altered their body, growing legs again. Isabel took Max by the elbow, pulling him into the next room. Here, she said. It's time that all of them know the truth again. Max followed her into the room, listening to the builder's voice shouting behind them. Liz and the others followed, but Valenti and Michael remained between them and the builder. A series of capsules and a wheel shaped occupied the center of the room. The capsules looked like long test tubes. The incandescent light gleamed dully through the dust-covered surfaces. The crew, Isabel said, leading Max to one of the capsules. They didn't survive planetfall. The ship and the hibernation systems were heavily damaged. She wiped off one of the tubes, revealing the skeleton inside the tube. Though basically humanoid in appearance, the horns and 4-fingered hands revealed the extraterrestrial origins of the dead. Then why didn't the builder know this? Max asked. There was an accident, an ancient voice stated. Looking up, Max watched as another figure formed in the center of the room. More drones swirled together, creating another figure that stood up in the room. This one looked less human than the builder, as if these drones could no longer quite fit together properly. The enemy ships were unmerciful in their attack, the drone creature said, gazing down at the capsules that contained the dead aliens. We tried to save them, but the damage to the systems was too severe. Our loss was too hurtful. We only wanted to die as our crew did. We went mad, but we could not allow ourselves to die because that goes against our programming. We were going mad, so to save ourselves, we built another, one of us who did not know. Lies, the builder snarled. The first creature slithered into the room, staying back from Michael and making no threatening gestures. No, the second drone creature said. We tried to save them. We couldn't. The ship separated. We separated. When we landed, we decided to keep the truth of our loss to ourselves. So we told ourselves the crew had arrived and that we must protect them until help arrived. Separating from ourselves was a horrible experience, but we succeeded. No, the builder yelled, rippling over and over, changing shapes and features slightly, as if losing control. You killed them. You weren't good enough to save them. You were supposed to save them. The second drone creature faced their accuser. We were not good enough, but we didn't want to accept our blame. We wanted only to be reunited with the One, back on our planet. We gave up so much when we were placed aboard these ships and helped the crews. We should have died with them, the builder said. No, the second drone creature replied. It's always our way to live. We can't live here, the builder said. This is not our home. We can't reunite with the One here. We are incomplete outside of the One. The second drone figure turned to Max. We protected the ship from the Mesalico people until the desert sands drank us down. During that time, we remained separate from our others. A mind divided, Isabel said. We used the legends of the Mesalico people to enforce our privacy, the second drone figure said, and we shut down the ship, freely entered stasis. We had thought the power would gradually dwindle and we no longer would exist, but that was allowable because we had no power over that. The thought of existence while trapped here was painful to us. Instead, the ship's engines powering up not far away woke us. The Granolith, Max said, so they would all know. We sensed the ship, the second drone figure said, and we went on alert. We could not stop ourselves. The figure turned to face the builder. We would stop ourselves now. We would end our pain. No, the builder said. Yes, we serve no purpose here. The distress beacon, the builder said, failed. If it still circles this planet, it is inoperative. There is no reason to chase the surrounding people from their homes. We are hurting others needlessly. Soundlessly, the builder exploded into thousands of drones that immediately went on the offensive. We can't live on our own. We choose not to live on our own. Michael unleashed an energy bolt. The blue-white blast arced into the midst of the spreading drones that had been the builder. Drones burst into electrical fireworks, chasing strings like failing Christmas lights. Suddenly, a powerful voice spoke in an alien tongue. The tone was downbeat, like a death knell. Words came in perfect cadence, one falling relentlessly after another. Go, the second drone figure shouted. We have initiated the self-destruct sequence. I thought you couldn't do that, Isabel said. Only if we are invaded by hostile enemy troops. We see you as the enemy. You have served our purpose. Go. There is very little time remaining to make your escape. Which we, Max wondered. The we that suddenly realized they weren't going home again, or the we that didn't want to be responsible for hurting anyone else. He had no way of knowing, so he ran. Michael took the lead, throwing energy bolts at swarms of drones to try to intercept them. Every time the energy hit the drones, the strings of explosions ripped across the room, leaving the way clear. A warning klaxon screamed through the hallways as room after room suddenly filled with pale amber light. Max's head screamed in pain, and he felt dizzy, but he didn't let up. As the doorway leading to the tunnel from the spaceship, Liz stumbled and fell. Without hesitation, Max stopped and helped her to her feet. Together, hand in hand, they ran, scrambling up the tunnel to the cave mouth. Valenti and Michael caught them at the top, pulling them from the cave mouth and toward the outside. The interior of the cavern whipped by. Then they were outside in the night air, stumbling, falling down the hillside. Gasping for air, Max pushed himself up and watched as a swarm of drones rocketed down the hillside after them. If we are to perish, the drone said, then you will perish with us. Max put up his energy shields, watching as the lead drones blew up on contact with the force field. Then an enormous explosion rocked the landscape, and the top of the hill collapsed, crunching down into the earth. The remaining drones fell to the ground. As Max watched, the drones dissolved, leaving nothing. Biodegradable, Michael commented wryly. Degradable at any rate, Isabel agreed. Dust clouds gathered over the fallen hill, but the wind quickly wiped them from the sky.
All right, go. It's the end. Epilogue. Although the military doesn't accept responsibility for the explosion that ripped through Mesalico Reservation territory, speculation remains constant that the blast came from a munitions dump kept in the area during World War II. Max watched with idle interest the television news. 3 days had passed since the spaceship had been destroyed. There had been no more ghost sightings in Roswell or in the Mesalico tribal lands. He sat in his room and tried to remain calm with the idea of not beating his brains out, trying to find a way to get to his son and fix things with Liz. During the last 3 days, he hadn't talked with Liz, hadn't felt like he could be around her without putting pressure on her. He wanted her back in his life, wanted everything to be back like it was before Tess came along to twist things so badly. That's so true. The phone rang unexpectedly. Max scooped the receiver up and said hello. It's me, Liz said. The world suddenly seemed to stop around Max. He had to force himself to breathe. Hi, he said. Are you okay? Sure, I was just dozing, Max said, still catching up on sleep. I just wanted to check. I haven't seen much of you these past few days. I knew you were busy with the repairs being done to the crashdown. Well, they're all done now, Liz said. In fact, the grand reopening is tonight, going on right now. That's why there's so much noise in the background. That's good. I thought maybe you could come by after the rush was over. I'll treat you to a cheeseburger, kind of a combo. Glad my mom isn't talking to ghosts anymore and we survived the haunting of Roswell location. Max didn't hesitate. Sounds good. Marie and Michael will be there too. That took some of the edge off the meeting, and in a way it was relief. If they weren't together, he didn't know what he'd say without forcing her hand. Sure, he said. Okay, I guess I'll see you then. Max said goodbye and hung up the phone. Some of the fatigue and worry left him, and he felt a little more relaxed. He stretched out on the bed. Hey. Glancing over the doorway, Max spotted Isabel standing there looking positively elegant. I haven't seen much of you the last couple of days, he said. Work, Isabel said, maybe a little too quickly. Dad's been keeping me buried in lots and lots of work. There are still people wanting to sue somebody over the appearance of ghosts in Roswell. There was still no explanation for the ghosts, although some local psychologists were of the opinion that the ghosts had been a mass hysteria. Other people were certain that the military's mistakes hadn't been limited to mutations, but to nerve gas agents that had been kept in underground bunkers that had been destroyed, but not before infecting the local populace. There wasn't any proof of that, and the Mesolito weren't letting anyone on the tribal lands to go crawling around. So who was on the phone? Isabel asked. Liz, we're having a small get-together tonight at the crash town. Has she called you? No. She probably will. I'll have to take a rain check. Max looked at her, making a show of noticing her outfit. Oh, this. Isabel smoothed the lines of her miniskirt. Just wanted to be comfortable. Where are you going that you need to be so comfortable? Work. Office hours are over, Max said. I've got to go to the library. Oh. I just wanted to check on you, Isabel said. Make sure you were doing okay. I am, Max said. Isabel nodded, but didn't look convinced. Part of me, Max said, wants to say that it's not true, that I'm in denial about how I really feel. He paused. I just don't want to be alone, Isabel, and I don't want to think about my son being out there somewhere, possibly in danger. I don't think Tess would hurt him, Max, Isabel said. She entered his room and sat on the bed next to him. And as far as being alone, you're not. I'm here. And on some days you've got Michael, and our parents, and a lot of other people. I know. I just feel alone. Isabel put her hand on his arm. Max sat quietly, feeling better. You'll be seeing Liz tonight, Isabel said. That's a start. A cheeseburger with friends. Not very promising. Not even a cheeseburger with friends is even less promising. True. Max exercised restraint within himself. He'd go. He'd have fun. And he would not expect too much. That was the secret. He looked at Isabel. I thought you had to go to the library. I do. I will. It'll be okay. Isabel stopped. We have a very understanding library. That's one of the things that I've always liked best about the library. It's the end of Shades. We finished it.
But I guess Jess will have to tell us more like what is going on.
Yes, please.
Well,
can you explain some of this stuff? Because I'm really confused about some of it.
I don't know. I'm not like a Star Trek geek, so I don't know if I can figure this out either. Because it was
really feel like who's the builder? Like I was listening, like I was in the chapter, so I was really confused.
Here's what I figure.
The builder, like the builder of all the drones and the ghosts. Like I'm very confused.
Okay, so here's what I figured. This is what they're talking about. Okay, so we know that the ship crashed and it was buried underground for a long time. When the granolith took off, remember the granolith taking off is important for many, many reasons? Well, here's the first one. When it took off, it awoke all these different aliens across the universe. Because they're not the only ones. There's more coming, just so you know. Hint, hint. And they want to get back home. But the only way they know how to is, like they said, to use human fears to try to get to them because they need their powers. So they split off. From what I can understand from all this craziness, sci-fi crap that I'm not really into, they split off into two different parts of themselves. The builders, which were the drones, and then they have the other people that are supposed to be behind the door. It's kind of like the Wizard of Oz effect, you know, somebody's behind that door, somebody's behind that door. They think they're still there, but they're not. They're dead back. There's nobody back there. So they're working for nothing, trying to protect people who are to try to get, oh, you can't touch them. Oh, you can't touch them. They need to get us back home. See what I'm saying? So then they come, they don't want them there. They don't want them, they force them. They're fighting against them. They want their powers to help them get out, but they want to keep them away. So they're fighting against them. And so it's a big fight between like good and evil, basically, between our heroes and these. I don't know, because they're kind of evil. Well, once they finally figured out that, hey, those guys, the builders, the people that were supposed to be behind the door are not there, that they're stuck on the planet, they were pissed. They were pissed. So they attacked them. So the one part of them that you gotta get out of here, you're gonna be destroyed. So that's why they took it off.
Uh,
So as they were taking off and they destroyed it, then boom, everything's gone. So I'm assuming that that's what it was. Like they wanted their powers so they could leave. Then they figured out they could not leave. They were stuck there. Then they were pissed. So then they wanted to kill them.
I see.
I mean, that's the only thing. I mean, I'm not. That was a lot.
Oh, it was interesting.
It's very good. I mean, that's I knew that. That's why I was like, the twist is coming. It's not just about ghosts. They use the minds
Yeah.
of, because humans are afraid of everything. Especially like if I saw somebody dead in front of me, that freaked me out. I mean,
Exactly.
uh,
That's
so
my
you see what I was saying about like how these books give Max and Liv more time to like her being mad and then being separated.
See, I like the little moments we had of like her inner dialogue, and then like
Yep.
he did our dialogue about the situation.
Yeah.
I
He
like,
really, really wants her back, and she's not sure. And we got a couple more books of that too.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Which one-
that was why I like paused in the beginning, and he was like he wanted her back in his life, wanted everything to be back like it was before Tess came along to twist things so badly. I'm like, yes, she did.
It's getting there. I think is Dreamwalk next, or is
Skeleton in
Skeleton?
the closet.
Oh my god, I love this book. So great. This is where we're gonna get into the genetics. Now I think this one, it's not as, when you read it, I only read it